Slytherin stands. Draco Malfoy watched the match with rapt attention, his eyes fixed on the broom the Ravenclaw seeker rode. As the game went on, his expression brightened. Faster speed, remarkable maneuverability, and was that a short, sharp vertical climb? Lucien had done it. He'd improved the east wind broom. Before Malfoy could savor the thought, a broad-shouldered figure shoved through the crowd and loomed over him. A harsh, loud voice cut in. "Did you see that, Draco?" Marcus Flint jerked his chin toward the path the east wind had just taken, a bully's grin spreading across his face. "Now that's the real deal. Go find your friend Lucien and get 7 of those for the team." Heat rushed into Malfoy's pale face. He snapped, incredulous. "I donated 7 brand new Nimbus 2001s to the team. Those are the best brooms on the market." "They were," Flint interrupted with a dismissive wave, his voice dropping to a threatening hush. "The only reason you were on the team was because the brooms you bought would make us faster, so we could crush Gryffindor and their ancient brooms. But now the east wind has turned up." He stepped closer, and his tall shadow swallowed Malfoy. "Listen, kid. I could find students who are better seekers than you. Don't think the team can't get along without you." It was plain harassment. Malfoy knew that while Flint had been serving detention, he'd taken the chance to run some practices and probably felt his authority challenged. Now he was using it as an excuse. Anger and unease churned in Malfoy's chest, but he didn't answer Flint. He had never felt his own strength was enough. Flint was brutish, but physically formidable. The next day, after a sleepless night, Malfoy swallowed his pride and found Lucien to explain haltingly. Lucien listened in silence, absently rubbing a thunderbird feather that flickered with faint blue arcs in his fingers. He was calm. He waited until Malfoy had finished, then asked what seemed like a strange question. "What's the most important requirement when selecting Quidditch team members?" Malfoy blinked. He answered automatically. "Flying skill, fitness, quick reactions." Lucien nodded. He'd already seen Malfoy fly during their training, and knew Draco had both the basics and a genuine love of Quidditch, not some passing hobby for a rich boy. "If your position is Seeker," Lucien said, "then tell me honestly. Among everyone in Slytherin who's eligible and willing to be Seeker, where do you rank?" Malfoy froze. He'd never thought of it that way. After a pause, he reasoned aloud. Older students were busy with OBULs and NEUTs. Most who wanted to play had already done so. First years couldn't join the team. It was unlikely another first-year phenomenon like Potter would appear. His true rivals were second to fourth years. There simply weren't many. When he ran the names through his head, the conclusion grew clear. His flying was sharp, his body suited to the role, and crucially, he had resources and training the others didn't. Within Slytherin, especially for Seeker, he was very good. Lucien saw the light returning to Draco's eyes and leaned forward slightly, his dark green gaze hard and steady. "So instead of buying an uncertain place with galleons, why not put that energy into becoming the best Seeker? Make yourself indispensable. If you become Slytherin's irreplaceable Seeker, if your team can't win without you, then they'll be begging you, not the other way around." He tapped the last point with a cold clarity. "A Seeker can catch the golden snitch in a single match and win 150 points. That decides games. You know how important that is." The panic Flint had stirred drained away from Malfoy, and something more solid took its place: ambition. The box whirled. Norbert lay massive and low, a restrained rumble vibrating through his black-scaled body. Up close, his dark hides were flecked with countless fine brilliant golden patterns that flashed faintly with every breath. Lucien stood beside him, his figure comparatively small, wand tracing quiet patterns in the air as he tapped specific points along the dragon's spine and wings. Every light touch sent an almost imperceptible ripple of magic outward, the golden filigree illuminated in response. "Relax, Norbert. Just one last step," Lucien murmured, soothing the restless beast. He was using a magic weaving technique to reorganize and optimize the dragon's natural magical circuits. Once complete, Norbert would surpass other Norwegian ridgebacks of his kind. But the final step required a crucial material: the heart of divined poison. When Lucien first read the term in the magic weaving notes, he'd been puzzled. The magical world's terminology was vast, and many ancient names had shifted in meaning. After asking his teacher Nicholas, Lucien learned that the heart of divine poison referred to the basilisk's heart, a concentrate of the serpent's deadly venom and its unique death and petrification magic, indispensable in certain forbidden alchemical practices to alter life essence and magical conduction. A basilisk's heart. Lucien glanced back at Norbert, at the golden lines that slackened slightly toward their ends. Perfect, if he could borrow a basilisk's heart for a short while. Inside the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, Gilderoy Lockhart's temples throbbed. He set aside his ornate peacock quill, rubbed his forehead, and peered at the old diary lying open on his desk. "Petrify pureblood," he muttered, baffled. That wasn't the plan as he'd understood it. Tom's original prompts had been about targeting Muggle-born students, safe, traditional, and consistent with the air of Slytherin's message. But now the diary suggested something bolder, more dangerous. Lockhart picked his quill back up and wrote his confusion, cautious on the page. Tom's figure in the diary, nourished by the steady supply of life-filled items Lockhart had fed it, especially dragon blood, was no longer a blur. The boy inside the book was clear and handsome, dark-haired and dark-eyed, with a cold intelligence that belied his years. He was near to remaking his body and slipping free from the pages. When Lockhart read the reply that appeared in the diary, the words were elegant and seductive. Tom Riddle, offered a wider view. Attacking Muggle-borns would cause fear, Tom wrote, but the pureblood families would largely ignore it or even endorse it. If a pureblood child were attacked, however, it would cause an uproar across the whole school. Parents of every background would be genuinely terrified. The panic would reach the governors and the ministry. Tom paused there and then fed Lockhart a bait he couldn't easily refuse. In a crisis, when despair was everywhere and the monster of the Chamber of Secrets still roamed, Lockhart could step in as a hero. Defeat the basilisk, the diary suggested. Save the school. The glory and praise would be immense. Tom's plans went further. He wanted Harry Potter removed first, then to orchestrate a massacre to be remembered in history. Dumbledore, Tom wrote, would be blamed for failing to protect the students. He might even be removed, tried, perhaps sent to Azkaban. With the headmaster distracted and discredited, Tom's own maneuvers would face far less opposition. And as for Lockhart, Tom was careful to flatter. At the right moment, Lockhart could step forward to help piece the mystery together, guiding suspicion away from himself and toward the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. That would clear him of suspicion and cement his fame and insight. Lockhart read and read, his frown deepening and then melting into a flutter of excitement. The idea of a heroic return, the adulation, how could he not be tempted? A little risk for a lifetime of glory sounded perversely like a bargain. Heavy snow lay thick around Hagrid's hut, dusting his woolen cap and bearding the big man with white. Hagrid's booming voice shook the flakes from his beard. "Thanks for the spell, Lucien, or more o' me roosters be dead." Hagrid looked worried beside his chicken coop. Lucien had just finished laying intricate wards and trap magics around it, layers of subtle enchantments designed to stop whatever foxes or vampires Hagrid feared. Hagrid blamed thieves for killing his birds. Lucien knew the real danger sat, unseen, in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, the basilisk, a creature hatched from a rooster's egg, and that the crow of a rooster was lethal to it. Lockhart, by clearing the way, had made Hagrid's roosters prime targets. "You're welcome. It was no trouble," Lucien said calmly, putting his wand away. "By the way, Hagrid, could I borrow a rooster?" Hagrid's bearded face split into a delighted grin at the idea. "Sure. Lucien, you cooking up chicken and mushroom stew again? I dried those mushrooms from the Forbidden Forest this summer. Think you'll need any?" "No, it's not for cooking," Lucien interrupted gently. Seeing Hagrid about to stumble off to fetch the mushrooms, he quickly explained. Hagrid brightened and, with an almost proud flourish, caught a spirited red-crested rooster from the coop, slipped it into a sturdy cage, and handed it to Lucien. As Lucien lifted the cage, Hagrid's voice dropped. He rubbed his large hands together, uneasy. "The school ain't safe lately, Lucien. The Chamber of Secrets, it was opened 50 years ago. People really died back then. But these petrifications now makes me wonder if it's the same thing." Lucien saw the fear in Hagrid's eyes. He knew how deeply the humiliated giant had felt being accused. He looked down at the bird in the cage, then back up, reassuring. It's all right, Hagrid. The truth will come out. He stepped into the wind and falling snow. The rooster crowed, sharp and clear, slicing through the hush. 2-2. Unexpected pureblood victim. The great hall was warm and smelled of food. Students chattered about the approaching Christmas holidays, trading plans to go home or stay at Hogwarts. Thanks to Lucien providing enough mandrake for the antidote, all the previously petrified victims had been revived, and the castle's gloom had lightened considerably. The mood was especially relaxed at the Slytherin table. Most of the students there came from old pureblood families and had been largely indifferent, some even secretly approving, of the rumors that the heir of the Chamber of Secrets wanted to expel Muggleborns. That calm shattered when Slytherin prefect Gemma Farley swept into the hall, pale and trembling slightly as she announced, Blaise Zabini and the Ghost, the Bloody Baron, were attacked in a corridor and petrified. Silence fell like a held breath, then the hall erupted. The Slytherin table reacted the loudest. Zabini? He's pure blood. How could it be? A pure blood. Panic spread through the Slytherins like wildfire. They had assumed they were not targets. Now they realized anyone might be next. Voices interwove. I'm writing home. I'm leaving early. Dumbledore and the professors must find whoever did this. My mother's on the school board. She wants answers. At their table, Draco Malfoy's face had gone hard. Zabini, the son of the woman famous for 7 late husbands and their fortunes, had always been a familiar figure to them. Malfoy glanced involuntarily toward Daphne Greengrass. Worry showed on her face, too. Their eyes met. No words were needed. The message was clear. Talk to Lucien. Prefects rose and tried to restore order. Stay calm. All students return immediately to your common rooms. Do not linger in the corridors. Reluctantly, the students dispersed, uneasy and unnerved. Later, in a deserted corridor, Dumbledore stood, tall and grave, his blue eyes probing behind half-moon spectacles. A group of professors clustered around 2 victims. Blaise Zabini leaned against the cold stone, mouth slightly open, face white with shock. One hand hung before him as if trying to shield himself. Floating not far away, the Bloody Baron, translucent and normally terrifying, hung rigid and dark, suspended as if frozen mid-approach. The Baron's face carried the same look of horror as Zabini's, a ghost petrified. No one could make sense of it. Even a ghost, Professor Flitwick murmured in disbelief. They hunched together, whispering possibilities, unsettled. Then Gilderoy Lockhart straightened his ostentatious robes and pushed forward with his practiced smile. Allow me a few words, Principal Professors. He swept an arm grandly, ensured all eyes were on him, and padded to Zabini. Pointing his wand at the boy's frozen face, he declared, Look at Mr. Zabini's expression. He must have seen his attacker before he was petrified, seen something so terrifying it froze him. We have the mandrake antidote now, Lockhart continued. Once Mr. Zabini is revived, he'll tell us who did this. He framed himself as calm, analytical, and concerned for the students. Whether Zabini would be able to identify the basilisk mattered little. Lockhart's plan did not depend on that. As long as more panic built up and he later stepped in and saved the school, his fame would grow. Severus Snape's only response was a cold look and an almost inaudible snort. Dumbledore watched Lockhart and Zabini with an inscrutable gaze. In the room of requirement, Draco paced. Lucien, should we go home early? He asked, worry making his voice tight. If even a pure blood like Zabini was attacked, what if the next one is? He left the sentence dangling. Daphne looked composed but helpless. The attack hit them where it hurt most, pride in blood and prestige. Lucien listened, urgency knotting in his chest. Lockhart, no, the Tom Riddle trapped in the diary, was pushing events to escalate. More victims would mean more chaos, and in the chaos the hero could emerge to reap the glory. Lucien had seen Lockhart's office and know the professor had supplied rare materials, dragon's blood, among other things, to the diary. Tom's plan was obvious. Regain strength, reconstruct a body, and strike while Dumbledore was weakened or distracted. Lucien's thoughts flicked to Dumbledore's vulnerabilities. If the school board and ministry began applying pressure, Dumbledore's attention might be forced elsewhere, exactly the opening Tom would need. Lucien considered whether Dumbledore would ask him to watch over things again. If so, perhaps he could negotiate for some favors, but there was no time for that now. Have you written to your families? Lucien asked Draco and Daphne. They both nodded. I did, Malfoy said irritably. Father told me not to act alone and that Dean Snape would look after me. He said the school board has complaints about Dumbledore, has for some time. Daphne added more calmly, my mother has already reported the situation to the ministry and the school board. She wants them to step in. Lucien produced several pairs of glasses in different styles. Draco and Daphne exchanged puzzled looks. What are those? Draco asked. In critical moments, they'll block your vision, stop you seeing things you shouldn't, Lucien explained. Then he called Harry, Ron, and Hermione forward and handed out pairs. And if you don't like framed glasses, he said, opening a slim box to reveal delicate contact lenses, there are also invisible ones. The lenses were alchemical devices Lucien had crafted, using thestral tail feathers as the core material. Their purpose was unusual, to blur and block images directly tied to death. To most, they appeared clear. To Lucien, who had faced death, they were like dark sunglasses. If you're really worried, you could also carry a rooster, he added offhandedly. A rooster? The students echoed, exchanging bewildered looks. Lucien left the remark unexplained and clapped his hands. All right, lesson time. We'll practice dealing with creature attacks. He flicked his wand, and a dozen slithering snakes appeared on the classroom floor. Hermione and Daphne shrieked and reflexively shielded Lucien. Harry and the others paled. Ron couldn't resist a dig at Malfoy. Isn't your house emblem a snake? Scared? Malfoy snapped back, feigning bravado. The group tried to use their charms to repel and control the serpents, but for some reason many snakes coiled toward Harry. He waved his wand until the tip smoked, still overwhelmed, and finally shouted, Go away! But Harry didn't notice his voice change. The words that came out were not English, but a hissing, serpentine speech, Parseltongue. The room of requirement fell utterly silent. Every movement stopped, every eye fixed on Harry, shock written on every face. Parseltongue! Malfoy was the first to cry, his look mixing alarm, suspicion, and something colder. Harry was bewildered. He remembered a snake at the zoo years ago, and how he'd joked it spoke of never having been to Brazil, back when he didn't even know about the wizarding world. Hermione stepped forward, eager to explain. Parseltongue, speaking to snakes, is extremely rare, especially as an innate ability. You didn't learn it, did you, Harry? He shook his head. The memory of the Sorting Hat insisting he might belong in Slytherin flashed through his mind. He remembered pleading to be put in Gryffindor. A chill went through him. Legend says Salazar Slytherin himself was a famous Parselmouth, Hermione added. Malfoy's gaze darted to Lucien and back to Harry, eyes wide. His voice trembled as he asked, Potter, you wouldn't be the heir of the Chamber of Secrets, would you? 203. The Rebirth of Fawkes. You're not the heir of Slytherin, are you? Malfoy's voice cut through the room of requirement, and everything went cold for a moment. The question made Harry's heart pound and his ears ring. He had spent days trying to find the real culprit. How could anyone suddenly accuse him of being the heir? Harry began, furious and speechless, his cheeks flushed. Ron, however, spoke up first. Malfoy, calm down. If Harry really were the heir, wouldn't you already be in the infirmary? Malfoy turned his head, glared, and hissed. Weasley, I am not joking. Ron's words had loosened the tension in the room a little. Lucien's voice, calm as ever, cut in. Harry, breathe and think back. You said that outside Lockhart's office and at the later attack sites you heard strange whispers or voices, didn't you? Harry frowned, trying to pull the fragments together. After a few moments, he answered uncertainly. Do you mean it could have been a snake talking? Hermione whipped her head toward Lucien. I went to the restricted section earlier to look up. Before she finished, the air in the center of the room twisted and warmed. Out of nothing, a ball of brilliant scarlet flame flared up, and a small bird burst from it, beating its fledgling wings. It fluttered, awkward but determined, and settled into Lucien's crook. The little phoenix was downy and orange-red, still in an awkward stage of molting. It chirped insistently, drawing everyone's attention away from the argument about Parseltongue and heirs. At the sight of the phoenix, the writhing snakes on the floor recoiled and slithered to the furthest corner, coiling into tight knots. Lucien listened to the bird, nodded, and murmured, The headmaster needs me urgently, and an old friend has arrived? A surprise? The phoenix bobbed its head and chirped again. Lucien smiled as he stroked its soft plumage. A surprise, then. Take me there, Fox. Fox! Harry and Ron exchanged looks and breathed out in unison. Early in the year, they had shelved a flying car in the headmaster's office and had been convinced they'd accidentally driven the Phoenix to its death. They had felt guilty and terrified since. It was a relief to see the bird reborn in the ordinary way. The Phoenix turned its head and gave a rapid, excited series of chirps aimed at Harry and Ron. They looked at Lucien, puzzled. Lucien, do you understand the Phoenix? The others, watching, realized the same thing. How could he converse with Fox? Was there a Phoenix language too? Lucien's expression was faintly embarrassed. Fox just sent a warm greeting to your family. Harry and Ron hadn't quite processed that when the Phoenix erupted into flame again. In a flash, both the bird and Lucien were engulfed in fire, and as the flames died, the man and his companion were gone. Harry paused and then turned to Hermione. Hermione, what were you going to say about the creature in the Chamber of Secrets? He did not want to be burdened with any title like heir, mastermind, or descendant of Slytherin. Hermione began to answer, but Daphne, watching the snakes stir again in the corner, pointed them out quietly. Shouldn't we get rid of those first? Looks like Lucien forgot to reverse whatever he used. Everyone reluctantly turned to the snakes and raised their wands. The students started barking at Harry. Potter, since you can talk to snakes, make them go away. Send them where, Potter? To your Slytherin common room as pets? Damn, Potter, want to duel me over this? Weasley, don't interfere. This is a proper one-on-one. The boys immediately erupted into shoves and insults again. Hermione and Daphne exchanged an eye roll and a look of shared amusement before stepping in to restore order. Meanwhile, Lucien had vanished to the headmaster's office on Fawkes's back. When the flames subsided, he steadied himself and saw Dumbledore behind his great desk, smiling as ever. The figure who had been turned away slowly faced Lucien, though a touch younger looking than last remembered. Lucien recognized him at once and said with pleasant surprise, Mr. Newt? Good afternoon, Headmaster. Good afternoon, Mr. Newt. Lucien greeted the two older wizards, set the still drowsy Phoenix on its perch, and sat by Newt. Newt looked healthier than Lucien had last seen him. The vitality restoration potion Lucien had sent earlier had clearly helped. Dumbledore, however, wasted no time. Blassie Zabini has regained consciousness after the Mandrake drought, Dumbledore said. Like Penelope Clearwater, the last thing he remembered was a huge yellow light. He also glimpsed a flash of green, shimmering scales. That's why I asked Newt to come, Dumbledore added. He understands magical creatures better than anyone. Newt explained their preliminary conclusions. There are several magical beings that can cause petrification, medusas, certain spirits, and others. But in these cases, the victims' bodies didn't turn to stone. It's as if their life was frozen in place. Even the Bloody Baron, a ghost, was affected. That's unusual. Lucien interjected. I also confirmed with Harry that he can understand Parseltongue and that he heard those whispers near the attack sites. Dumbledore, didn't you say those locations had standing water, mirrors, or reflective surfaces? Newt asked, eyes sharpening. Dumbledore nodded. Then I believe the creature in the chamber must be a basilisk. The king of serpents, Newt went on. Any creature that looks directly into a basilisk's yellow eyes dies instantly. If someone sees the eyes indirectly, through water or a reflection, the effect doesn't kill them outright. It leaves them in that suspended, petrified state we have seen. He added, the Bloody Baron, being already dead, could not be killed by the basilisk, which explains his odd condition. Lucien's brow lifted. Isn't a basilisk afraid of roosters? Yes, Newt said. A rooster's crow can harm a basilisk severely. Lucien unlatched a small cage and set a dozing rooster on the desk. Hagrid told me several of his roosters were killed. He thought vampires or foxes, but I checked the coop and found no tracks. That piece fit into place for Newt. He met Dumbledore's gaze. Roosters slain, indirect petrification, green scales, all signs point to a basilisk. Dumbledore gave Newt a grateful look. Thank you, Newt. You have cleared up much for us. Newt waved it off. You provided the clues, Headmaster. This is a field I know. I'm glad to help Hogwarts. Dumbledore turned to Lucien. Do you have any suspects? Lucien answered as if he had been expecting the question. Professor Snape and I discussed it privately. With Hogwarts' recent tradition, the The defense against the dark arts professor is a prime suspect. Dumbledore sighed and adjusted his spectacles. Severus has good reason to be bitter about that position. I didn't ask him to take it again this year. Lucien pressed on. Have you suspected Gilderoy Lockhart? Have you looked into him? I tried, Dumbledore said, but I found no memory fragments relating to the chamber or the attacks. Lucien felt a flicker of thought. Dumbledore had used legilimency on Lockhart, but Lockhart, given his skill with memory charms, might have performed a subtle charm upon himself, hiding or deleting specific memories rather than obliterating them outright. It was possible, perhaps with help from someone like Tom Riddle. Changing the subject, Lucien asked, Have you found anyone willing to take the defense against the dark arts post? Dumbledore's expression became weary. That post is difficult to fill. Few are both capable and willing. His gaze drifted to Newt, who had gone uncomfortably still. Newt blurted, almost tripping over his words, No, teaching a classroom full of students is not for me. I wouldn't know how to manage so many children, and Tina would never agree to me teaching this subject. Dumbledore chuckled softly and eased him. I wasn't offering it to you, Newt. I was wondering if, through your travels, you might know anyone suitable. Newt relaxed, thinking hard, absently worrying the edge of his coat. After a moment, he looked up. There is one person who might be suitable, though their identity is complicated to reveal publicly. He met Dumbledore's eyes and added quietly, Headmaster, you already know them. 204. The sniff that needs to lose weight. Hearing Newt's reply, Dumbledore's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he did not press the matter. After a few more casual exchanges, Newt steered the conversation back to Lucien, his tone relaxing. Oh, Lucien, how have the little ones been lately? They're all doing very well. Lucien smiled and produced a small, exquisitely decorated palm-sized box from his pocket, the briefcase he had shrunk and altered. Some of the residents inside are too large to release here, so we'll go into the case later to see them. For now, though. He opened the little box and waved his wand gently inside. Moments later, a drowsy niffler, all platinum blonde fluff, wobbled out. It was Gingy. Newt reached out and caught the creature. Gingy rolled in his palm until it found a comfortable spot. Newt weighed it with a reflexive hand. There was a heavy, soft, springy feeling in his palm. His expression tightened slightly, and his tone took on an odd edge. Lucien, don't you think Gingy feels a bit solid for a niffler that age? Perhaps the little fellow has been secretly stashing more treasure in his nest, Lucien said, and idly scratched Gingy's soft belly with a finger. With a clear, pleasant clinking, coins and jewelry, gold and silver, shiny cufflinks, and even hundreds of galleons and sickles spilled from the pouch on Gingy's belly. The headmaster's office glittered with a sudden shower of treasure. Squeak! Gingy woke with a start. It watched desperately as the treasures it had painstakingly collected spilled away and frantically stretched out its tiny paws to scoop them back. Its paws were too short. It could only wave them fruitlessly, its small eyes full of despair. Embarrassingly, even after everything emptied out, the round plush of platinum fur showed no visible slimming. An awkward silence fell over the office. Lucien quietly scooped the coins back into his pocket, gently cradled the protesting niffler in his arms, and cleared his throat. Ahem, I'll be strict about this little one's diet. Dumbledore watched with amusement behind his half-moon spectacles. Ha ha! Lucien, you clearly have a knack for caring for magical creatures. They seem very comfortable with you. His gaze drifted to the miniature briefcase. I wonder, might I have the honor of stepping into your case world for a visit? It was not a whim. A few days earlier, during a Quidditch match, he had glimpsed something that might have been a thunderbird far above the clouds and had been wondering ever since. Seeing the same style of briefcase in Lucien's hand as Newt's gave him his answer. Of course, no problem. Lucien agreed without hesitation. He did not keep many creatures in the case. He led Dumbledore and Newt into the pocket world he had arranged. The tour was not long, and soon they were back in the headmaster's office. Dumbledore fixed Lucien with a serious look. Lucien, while you are here at school, you must keep a very close eye on that case. Dumbledore had not only glimpsed the expected Thunderbird, he had also seen a dragon. It looked somewhat unusual, but Dumbledore could just about place it as a Norwegian ridgeback. The idea of a student casually carrying a case containing a thunderbird and a dragon around Hogwarts left Dumbledore uneasy. Newt was quick to reassure him. Dumbledore, rest easy. The case I gave Lucien has been completely modified. Its protective enchantments are top tier. Those creatures cannot escape. Dumbledore cast Lucien a look that said he knew Newt's long history with incidents. Do not worry, Headmaster. I will certainly look after them, Lucien promised. Dumbledore seemed relieved. If Lucien could even transfigure magical creatures himself, keeping a few around did not seem such a burden. Fawkes, who had not long ago been busy returning Newt to his departure, left a few unextinguished sparks floating in the air and settled again. Now only Lucien and Dumbledore remained in the office. Regarding the basilisk, Dumbledore said calmly, "Do you have any thoughts beyond what we've already discussed?" Lucien considered briefly. "I believe the basilisk's existence should remain secret for now, known only to the dean and the professors. If the students learn of it, panic could spread. For now, the priority is to locate the basilisk within the castle and deal with it completely." "Indeed," Dumbledore said. "The basilisk's most lethal feature is its gaze. There is death magic in its eyes. So far, victims have been spared actual death only because the gaze reached them through reflections, water, mirrors, or ghosts. We cannot trust luck to hold forever." Lucien had observed Lockhart and Tom's conspiracy before. Lockhart had not dared to actually kill, and Tom had promised only petrification. Lucien did not trust Tom's promises. They were likely designed to keep Lockhart in line. He produced a simple pair of glasses from his pocket and set them down on the desk. "Principal, this is an experimental item I made through alchemy. I wondered whether it might work against the basilisk's gaze." Dumbledore tapped the frame with the tip of the Elder Wand. Magic flowed like a slow stream as he probed the internal structure of the glasses. After a moment, he handed them back, admiration plain on his face. "Ingenious," Lucien explained. "I wove thestral tail hair into the material. The thestral's unique nature, only visible to those who've witnessed death, inspired me. These glasses blur things related to death for the wearer. Perhaps they will block or weaken the basilisk's gaze." Dumbledore suggested thoughtfully, "You might add a permanent charm that scatters or deflects gazes, another layer of protection." They discussed improvements to the thestral glasses and related alchemical approaches. Before long, Fawkes hopped back into the room, not on his perch but landing lightly on Lucien's shoulder. With his small beak, he preened the ends of Lucien's hair. Dumbledore smiled. "Fawkes is fond of you." Lucien scratched the phoenix's fluffy head. "Perhaps I have a magical creature's attracting constitution." Dumbledore's amusement deepened, one of the reasons Newt valued Lucien. His expression sobered as he shifted subjects. "Lucien, in the coming days, I will be extremely busy, and the daily oversight of the school will suffer. I have long worried about Harry. I have a premonition that this year's threat will ultimately target him." The words trailed off, but Lucien understood. The familiar protector script. Dumbledore was not about to use the basilisk to temper Harry again, was he? Lucien's gaze flicked toward the sorting hat in its glass case, which swayed slightly and hummed faintly. "I understand," Lucien said calmly. "If things go wrong, I will look out for Harry." He added to himself that when the basilisk was found, he would kill it. Its heart would be a key material for his magic weaving technique and to finish Norbert's magical circuit. Once that was done, he could ask Dumbledore about tapping into the castle's magical core. The emotional energy collected over years might let him reach the threshold for creating a philosopher's stone through alchemy. If he could manage that, he could try making one. Dumbledore relaxed visibly. "I am relieved, but even though your strength far exceeds your peers, do not overexert yourself. Let the professors handle it when possible. Confronting a basilisk is extremely dangerous. The professors can protect the students, and Hogwarts itself has backup defenses." "Defensive measures?" Lucien asked. He thought at once of McGonagall's charm, Pure Totem Locomotor, which could animate the statues and suits of armor to defend the castle. "No problem. I'll keep that in mind." Lucien then asked, "Principal, will you handle the pureblood families and the school board?" "More or less." Dumbledore's eyes looked tired. The previous attacks produced only a lukewarm reaction from them, but the attack on Zabini caused a stir. I must address the concerns coming from the board and the ministry." Lucien was not surprised. The purebloods kept distance unless it affected them, and they knew Dumbledore's temperament, powerful but rule-bound. It was the restraint that kept him in his post. Lucien made no comment. Whatever saved time was fine with him. The next day, the mood in the headmaster's office was grave. The professors of Hogwarts had been summoned. When Dumbledore announced that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was the legendary basilisk, surprised gasps filled the room. McGonagall went pale and clutched her chest. Even the usually composed Snape had a shadow in his eyes. Lockhart, sitting off to one side, performed terror with dramatic handkerchief flourishes, but inside he was calm. Whether the basilisk had been exposed or not no longer mattered to him and Tom. Their hero script was already set, waiting for its final act. "Dumbledore, we must take the strictest measures immediately," McGonagall insisted. "Do not be overly anxious, Minerva," Dumbledore replied, steady. "Not anxious. It's a basilisk. Looking into its eyes kills." Others in the room were silent. Everyone knew that though Dumbledore was headmaster, McGonagall had carried the burden of running much of the school and protecting the students. Sylvanus Kettleburn, the former Care of Magical Creatures professor, raised a scarred hand. He had a silver-gray magical prosthetic on his left arm. "Forgive me, Dumbledore," he rumbled. "The Chamber of Secrets has been there more than 1,000 years. Even if it was Salazar Slytherin's basilisk, could it have lived that long?" Several professors exchanged doubtful looks. Dumbledore answered, "I consulted Newt Scamander. If the basilisk had special methods of hibernation, given their typical lifespan of 800 or 900 years, it is quite possible it survived from the Slytherin era until now." Kettleburn repeated Newt's name under his breath. The doubt left his face. Newt's word carried authority in the field of magical creatures. McGonagall returned to practical matters. "We must immediately restrict student movements. Nighttime roaming must be absolutely forbidden," she said. "But the news that the monster is a basilisk must not be disclosed to students. It would cause mass panic." "I agree completely, Minerva," Dumbledore said, then produced a pair of ordinary-looking glasses. "Both we and the students need extra protection. These are Lucien's invention. They can partially block the basilisk's gaze." He transfigured a box containing various frames and a set of thin, invisible contact lenses. Lucien prepared multiple styles. One by one, the professors took glasses. When only one pair remained, it turned out to be a rather whimsical design. Little bee, glasses with tiny wings, and a few suppressed chuckles rippled through the room. Snape's expression grew darker as he discovered he had received an exaggerated batwing frame. He rose at once and stalked out, looking for all the world like a large bat in flight. The other professors departed in succession. Dumbledore's gaze lingered on Lockhart's quietly retreating back. Today the man was unusually silent, devoid of his grandiloquent rhetoric. Dealing with Lucien was a piece of cake, Tom wrote. In the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, candlelight guttered. Gilderoy Lockhart tossed a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles onto the desk, picked up his peacock quill, and scribbled furiously into an old yellow diary. He recorded Dumbledore's announcement of a basilisk, the professors organized to search for it, and the distribution of special spectacles supposed to block the monster's deadly gaze. Ink pooled and spread until new letters crawled into existence on the blank page. Tom Riddle's reply: "The spectacles don't matter. Our original plan was always to petrify those young wizards. Now that the glasses block the gaze, it saves us trouble. We don't have to look for puddles or mirrors anymore. Don't worry about that student, Lucien. He won't affect the plan." Tom Riddle toyed with a duplicate pair of gold-rimmed spectacles, identical to the ones Lockhart had just thrown down. His black eyes were cool and indifferent. He turned them over, then dropped them lightly into his palm. "Thestral Tailfeather," he mused, and with a casual motion, he tossed the spectacles up and caught them. First, he supplied mandrakes, which sped up the victim's recovery and calmed the panic. Now he has these spectacles. A shadow of annoyance crossed the surface of that composed expression. "Lucien Grafton is a nuisance," Tom wrote, but he suppressed the irritation quickly. His priority was not trifles. He had to gather enough life force to complete his resurrection. Once his body was whole again, everything else would be easy. Controlling the basilisk and killing Harry Potter would come first. Dealing with Lucien was a convenient side task. Even if the spectacles truly blocked the basilisk's gaze, he thought, the creature is more than eyes. Its bulk can crush people, its venom corrodes bone and soul, and its scales resist most charms. Faced with panicked students, a blinded basilisk could still slaughter efficiently by crushing or spraying venom. Tom's fingers closed around the spectacles, and they shattered into motes of light across the page. He added, I hope that when the time comes, that troublesome Lucien won't be too far from Harry Potter. Then he wrote a new, practical line. Friend, the plan remains the same. How are the materials for that potion I told you about coming along, the one that temporarily stimulates magic? It will make your effects more spectacular. Very useful for your heroic entrance. Outside the diary, Lockhart read the new words and answered with a flourish. Oh, don't worry. Almost all gathered, just the last insignificant ingredient to find. In truth, Lockhart had already gathered and brewed the potion. He'd tested it on a toad. It made the toad suddenly more lively, but caused no harm. It seemed to be a harmless restorative, a temporary stimulant for magic. Even with Tom's help, Lockhart remained cautious about drinking it himself. Sometimes Lucien's gaze made him uncomfortable, as though the boy could see through him, but most of the time, Lucien behaved normally. Unseen by Lockhart, a tiny spider hung on a filmy thread in the air nearby. A minute black swirl formed around the thread, and by some hidden magic of the diary, the new writing flashed into Lucien's vision as clearly as if someone had read it aloud. Potion to stimulate magic, the thought touched his mind and went about its business. Outside, the storm came down in sheets of rain, lightning tearing the sky. Lucien walked the corridor with a pair of silver-rimmed spectacles perched on the high bridge of his nose. His dark green eyes scanned the students passing by. Under the professor's supervision, every student wore either thestral spectacles or invisible protective contact lenses. Lucien, do you think anything else is going to happen at school? Harry asked uneasily. He, too, wore thestral spectacles, just like his original pair. Lately, he had been feeling uneasy, the same prickly dread that had preceded the confrontation with Quirrell. First travel restrictions, then Quidditch suspended. Could it be the Chamber of Secrets? Ron grumbled, unused to his invisible contacts. Even if he was often clumsy, he could feel the castle's atmosphere thickening, much like the rain-heavy air outside. Hermione, who had been listening, spoke up sharply. Lucien, are these spectacles connected to the monster? I read that some magical creatures can harm through eye contact. Lucien nodded. She was reading the right kinds of books. In the original telling, it had been Hermione who first identified the chamber's monster as a basilisk. He opened his mouth to answer. The creature in the chamber is, when Harry clutched his ears and flinched, pain and fear crossing his face. It's here again. That sound. I hear it, Harry said between gasps. Lucien heard it too. Not in Parseltongue, but through his ability to understand animals, an ability born of the unicorn's blessing. From deep within the castle's walls came a wet, scraping, sliding sound, heavy and sickly. The basilisk used Hogwarts' labyrinth of pipes to move unseen. His eyes behind his lenses darkened, tiny black vortices spun in his pupils. He snapped his head toward the solid wall at the corridor's end. Evil, cold magic crawled inside the pipes. His wrist flicked, and a silver-black wand slid into his palm. Harry, what did you hear? Ron demanded, shaking his friend hard. That sound, we were calling my name, Harry stammered. Before he could finish, there was an enormous crack of thunder that rattled the castle, and at the same instant the stone wall at the end of the corridor spiderwebbed with fissures. Bits of masonry cascaded down. Lucien's wand flashed. A soft but forceful barrier wove out, catching several students who had been nearest the wall and jarring them back to safety. With his left hand, he slapped into his robe pocket and sent something black and red hurtling down the corridor with a high whistle. The wall exploded inward. Dust and bricks flew in a blinding storm. Within the choking dust, a pair of enormous, coldly glowing yellow lanterns lit up. Patches of emerald scales shimmered and vanished like lightning, outlining a winding shape. Just as those killing yellow eyes began to become visible, a tremendous magical blast erupted from the center of the dust. An invisible shockwave hurled the creature backward. The basilisk gave a strangled, muffled roar as it slammed through another wall and disappeared into the pounding rain outside. When the dust cleared, beside Lucien stood the black and red object that had streaked from his pocket. An alchemical automaton, handsomely crafted metal, scorched and warped from recent impact. Embedded in its chest pulsed a philosopher's stone, glowing with a raw red light. Lucien had designed a combat module for the machine and driven it with a stone gifted by Nicholas. It had pushed out a tremendous burst of power and suffered structural damage in return. Magic flowed silently across Lucien's wand as he guided the damaged automaton. It stamped, transforming into a streak of black and red, crashed straight through the ruined wall, and shot into the storm, chasing the basilisk toward the open lawns. Lucien flicked his wrist and bottles clinked into his hand. He shoved several petrification antidotes into Harry's palms. The three of them were still reeling. "Some classmates got hit. Check them first," Lucien said quickly. A few unlucky students had looked long enough into the basilisk's yellow eyes that, though the thestral spectacles had prevented instant death, the dark magic had still petrified them. He moved to the gap created by the automaton, and the gale from outside whipped icy rain in. Hermione, shaken but quick to think, called after him, "Lucien, wait, what are you doing?" Lucien already stood at the edge of the breach. Without hesitation, he stepped out and fell. "Going to protect the future of the magical world," he shouted, his voice carried on the wind. They lunged toward the gap instinctively, reaching to catch him. A roaring wind came up from below. Then a golden form tore through the curtain of rain. Harry, with the best motion sight among them, caught a glimpse. A magnificent, enormous bird, emblazoned with streaks of electricity, and Lucien riding on its back. In the next heartbeat, they were already speeding away across the rain-swept lawn. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm, eyes wide with revelation. "That sound you heard, that wasn't just noise. It was Parseltongue. The creature in the Chamber of Secrets is a snake, a basilisk." Her mind had already put the pieces together. The gaze, the petrifications, Harry's ability to hear the whispers. "Go find a professor immediately." They all understood without saying it. Separating would be faster than running together. Harry pressed the antidote bottles into the hands of a nearby pale student, and with Ron and Hermione sprinted in different directions down the corridor to find a teacher and get help back to Lucien. 206. Advanced Elemental Thunder Pattern. The fierce wind howls, and the cold raindrops are stretched into long silver threads by the rushing air. Every beat of Thunderbird Ether's 3 broad pairs of wings whips up vortices that tear through the rain curtain. He lets out a loud cry, which the link translates into Lucien's ears. "Boss, that long worm down there looks gross. Want me to help fight it?" Lucien, sitting steady on Ether's back, pats the bird's neck and answers calmly, "No need. Just watch from the sky and help urge and guide the lightning." Large raindrops are carried toward him by the wind, but before they touch his clothes, an invisible barrier silently deflects them. The smile on Lucien's face is one of pleasure, not from the imminent fight, but from the system prompt floating in his view. Loan triggered, Advanced Elemental Thunder Sigil. Loan content, obtain Advanced Elemental Thunder Sigil, increasing host's affinity for the thunder element, accelerating learning speed for thunder magic, and increasing thunder magic power by 50% when cast. Loan task, slay 1 mature basque. Does the host wish to borrow? A loan related to elemental sigils has refreshed. Lucien is in a great mood. This is a godsend. The previous basic thunder sigil already proved its worth by amplifying all his thunder magic. The higher the level, the more terrifying the boost. Besides raw power, an elemental sigil also improves communication with the corresponding natural element during casting. The basic sigil could slightly draw in heavenly lightning, elevating his spells. If it upgrades to advanced, the pull on lightning will be even stronger, essentially an increase in elemental affinity. The system had even hinted at a small surprise once all the elemental sigils were collected. He can't help being curious. And a mature basilisk? There's one right below. Basilisks only live 800 or 900 years. This one, born in Slytherin's time and now 1,000 years old, more than qualifies. Borrow. Ding, loan application successful. Comment. One step closer to the complete elemental sigil illustration collection. You got this. What illustration collection? What has the system been up to? Before Lucien can finish his mental complaint, a scorching, magnificent power floods into his right hand. Looking down, the silver-white lightning sigil branded on his thumb has become more intricate and deeper, as if it contains the very might of thunder. Around the purple arcs that dance on the sigil's surface, a streak of agile cyan electric light appears. A faint pressure radiates from his body. As if answering a call from the same source, the already thundering clouds above grow more violent. Silver snakes of lightning dance wildly and thunder rumbles. The power of heaven and earth resonates with Lucien. "Oi, boss, you smell even better!" Aether cries out excitedly. Thunderbirds are most sensitive to pure, powerful lightning auras. Lucien smiles and pats his little brother again. His sharp gaze turns toward the ground, where the basilisk writhes in the rain. Its dazzling emerald scales stand out in the gloom. The massive body twists and slams on the muddy grass, trying to shake off the harassment. The black and red alchemy puppet trails bright magic contrails behind it, circling and harrying the basilisk, driving it toward the open grassland as Lucien directs. The black vortex in his eyes spins faster and faster. He murmurs, a hint of playful satisfaction in his voice, "I can get multiple uses out of one snake." Rain pours and thunder booms over the empty grassland. The basilisk rolls and thrashes in the mud, its hard scales scraping the ground. It opens its massive mouth from time to time and sprays corrosive venom that smokes white as it eats at the air, trying to dissolve the ghost-like alchemy puppet darting around it. The puppet is an inanimate construct, so the basilisk's yellow eyes of death have no effect, but the creature's sheer size and bone-eating venom still threaten the automaton. Hot magical flames flare on the puppet's surface, instantly vaporizing raindrops into white mist, allowing it to avoid direct hits. Suddenly, the philosopher's stone embedded in the puppet's chest gleams like a small sun. Hiss! Hiss! Hundreds of condensed magic beams burst from its surface, tracing strange, living arcs as they automatically track toward the basilisk. The basilisk hisses but does not dodge. It curls its body, using its hard-scaled trunk to shield its relatively vulnerable eyes and snout. Bang, bang, bang! Scattered beams graze the scales and slide away, punching open pits in the mud. Most of the beams slam into the scales, but the magic is greatly weakened before impact. They erupt into dazzling but ineffective sparks, like fireworks striking steel, spectacular but unable to deal real harm. In the flash of lightning, puppet and snake crisscross a dozen times. As the basilisk once more blocks the beams and its vision is obscured, the puppet stops. Its right arm rises. The arm structure unfolds in layers as dazzling magic converges with a buzzing hum. It is preparing to fire a super high-power energy cannon. That instant is the basilisk's opening. Almost the same moment the puppet begins to charge, the basilisk snaps its coiled body open like a compressed spring. Its long trunk becomes an out-of-control steam train, charging straight forward with crushing force. The puppet tries to interrupt its charge and dodge, but the sudden cancellation slows it. The basilisk's thick, pillar-like tail, shrieking through the rain, strikes the puppet at the waist. Crack! The sharp, grating sound of shattering pierces the storm. The black and red puppet is flung away like a kite with a broken string, crashing into the mud. The basilisk raises its head, its yellow vertical pupils sweeping the empty grassland, greedily fixating on the castle faintly visible through the rain. Countless fresh, warm lives lie there, an irresistible temptation to a creature starved too long. It spent most of its years hibernating, fed only occasionally. Its last full meal was long ago. Additionally, the entity that commands it wants a grand slaughter. Desire and command push the basilisk's killing intent to a peak of madness. Ignoring the defeated puppet, it twists its body and begins to accelerate its climb toward the castle. Boom! A massive bolt of lightning wrapped in purple and cyan arcs slams down, striking the basilisk's raised head squarely. Only after the pillar of lightning begins to dissipate does the deafening roar follow. Numbness and searing burning pain ravage the basilisk. It hisses in agony as its massive body rolls in the mud, churning muck everywhere. When the lightning clears, the basilisk shakes its scorched, smoking head and fixes its bloodthirsty yellow pupils on the new figure that has appeared before it. A young man stands motionless in the heavy rain, his body wreathed in errant electric arcs. Two particularly thick currents, one purple, one cyan, coil around him like living spirit snakes. Rain is shattered and vaporized by the leaping arcs before it can touch him, forming a hazy mist around him. Under the dual obstruction of rain and vapor, the basilisk's deadly yellow gaze meets the young man's calm, dark green eyes. The expected death or petrification does not occur. The silver-framed glasses perched on the bridge of the young man's nose flare with deep black light upon contact with the lethal stare, swallowing and deflecting the magic and curse until it vanishes. Lucien is completely unharmed. He had been watching the puppet fight the basilisk and confirmed that conventional magic was ineffective against those hard scales. His gaze slides to a spot on the basilisk's flank where dark red blood slowly seeps, the wound the puppet's energy cannon left, but nothing more. He studies the arcs still dancing across the basilisk's body and the scorched, cracked scales. The lightning's effect is obvious. Is lightning inherently suppressive to this creature? Then he will simply increase the power. The basilisk hesitates. Its death gaze failed against a living creature. Instinctual warnings flare inside it. The tiny human before it inspires a dread it has never felt. You are not Harry Potter. Malicious hissing sounds intermittently come from its giant mouth, their meaning nonetheless clear to Lucien. But you must die too. Lucien watches the basilisk slowly coil to attack. Magic within him surges like a floodgate thrown open, rushing toward the wand in his hand. On the wand's surface, dazzling magical flames and purple cyan electric snakes, laden with violent energy, weave and churn, emitting a low hum. The amplification from the advanced elemental thunder sigil is remarkable. The 50% power bonus lets his thunder magic leap beyond its original rank. More than power, the sigil sharpens his affinity for thunder. The surrounding free thunder elements rush to him at a thought, smooth and quick. Beyond that, he senses a vast sea of thunder accumulating in the thick clouds overhead. His perception of natural lightning has never been clearer. He feels on the verge of commanding the electricity itself. The higher the sigil's rank, the more acutely one perceives nature, and thus borrows the power of heaven and earth. Just then, a clear, loud cry pierces the thunderclouds and slides through the rain into Lucien's ears. Aether confirms. The corner of Lucien's mouth lifts. He looks at the poised basilisk and chuckles softly. What are you waiting for? Kill. The basilisk hisses in furious rage. Silver-white plasma, thick as mercury, pours from the sky like a waterfall and instantly engulfs the basilisk with magnificent heavenly might. Immediately afterward, a thunderclap more violent than before explodes over Hogwarts. Inside the castle, the first thunderclap had startled some students, but they only glanced up. Moments later, boom! The second roar descends like a god's wrath. The ancient castle trembles, hanging portraits fall silent. It is as if thunder itself has broken through the heavens to strike the mortal world. Around dinner time, students scatter throughout the castle. The earth-shaking noise causes alarm. Conversations and gasps ripple in corridors and common rooms. Soon the students perched high in the towers with a better view are the first to notice the anomaly on the grassland by the Black Lake. It is impossible to look away. The sky seems torn open. Ink-dark clouds spin wildly into a huge vortex. In the center, countless thick bolts of lightning, blazing and continuous, grow madly out of the clouds. They are not fleeting flashes, but steady streams pouring down, forming an inverted peak of pure thunder. Tens of thousands of bolts intertwine and erupt, their light briefly banishing the darkness and illuminating every terrified, stunned face in stark white. In a corridor near the windows, students drawn by the thunder press to the glass. I can't see. That lightning was too blinding, and now it's so dark. Don't rush. I brought them. I bought these binoculars for Quidditch, but I didn't expect to use them for this. A student eagerly raises the binoculars to his eyes and then inhales sharply. His voice changes pitch. Merlin. A snake. A huge snake. What snake? Let me see. The next student snatches the binoculars and nearly drops them after one look. Merlin's beard. It's still moving. I knew it. I read about it in a book. This is called tribulation crossing, when an animal is about to transform into a human. Wake up. You must have gone crazy from those 7th workshop novels. We have magic here, not animal transformations. Tribulation Crossing? Another student, staring intently out the window, speaks with uncertainty and a tremor in his voice. Look, near that big snake, isn't there? A human figure? Damn it, it's too dark. I can't see clearly. The Great Sword of Gryffindor. The Great Sword of Gryffindor. Ron, panting and out of breath, barreled into Professor McGonagall's office. Professor, this is terrible. His face was flushed from running and fear. Lucien. What? When McGonagall heard Ron's breathless report, she staggered, her face draining of color. She had to steady herself against the wall. Lucien, how dare he go after the basilisk alone? Her voice snapped with shock and lingering fright. An absurd but strangely fitting thought pushed through her panic. The Sorting Hat must have made a mistake. For that sort of outrageous courage, Lucien should have been in Gryffindor. This basilisk, why did it have to attack when Dumbledore isn't here? Without a second's hesitation, she swept from her office, wand already in hand. She flicked it, and quick silvery birds of light shot from its tip like arrows, scattering through the castle to summon the other professors. Outside, the lawn was a ruined steaming mess after the lightning and the basilisk's struggle. Charred pits alternated with upturned mud, and the air tasted of burnt material and blood. The basilisk lay limp in the muck and rain, as if truly dead. Lucien stood motionless nearby, little whirlpools spinning in his eyes as he scanned through the rain and the beast's skin, examining the flow of magic inside it. All right, stop playing dead. A faint, pitiful hiss answered him, weak, lacking the strength even to lift its head. Wait a moment. The wand in Lucien's hand was steady. This 1,000-year-old Serpent King was tenacious. It had survived heavenly lightning. Between terrified hisses it pleaded, I just need to borrow your heart. Before Lucien could reply, the limp snake suddenly summoned hidden strength and lurched forward. It wasn't heading for Lucien or the castle. Its course was for the forbidden forest. It had slept too long. The humans outside had become horrifying. That young wizard was monstrous. It needed to hide in the tangled forest where it could crawl and feed and recover. It hadn't gone far when a towering wall of pure golden flame sprang up before it, a sacred, unassailable barrier that blocked its path. Almost at once, a ring of the same golden fire formed, encircling Lucien and the basilisk. The flames radiated a calm, gentle warmth, no heat to a human touch, but every instinct warned the basilisk not to cross them. Once I've dealt with you, I have other things to do, a voice like a demon's whisper echoed directly in the basilisk's mind. Lucien took a step. Chirp! A familiar crimson fireball burst through the rain. Fawkes, his young feathers still delicate, flapped to Lucien's side. Clutched in the phoenix's talons was the battered, patched Sorting Hat. Oh, Fawkes, you didn't leave with Dumbledore? Lucien reached for the hat. The instant it touched his hand, the slit that served as a mouth opened, and in its theatrical way the hat sang, loud enough to cut through the storm. Behold, thunder sweeps away evil. The sacred sword slays the demon serpent. Where had the hat learned that? Lucien slipped his hand inside the seemingly shallow interior. As if into bottomless space, his fingers found something cold and solid. A hilt. He pulled. A magnificent longsword appeared in his hand. Its hilt gleamed with pigeon egg-sized rubies, and the silver-white blade shone with a cold light that seemed able to cut through darkness and evil. The Sword of Gryffindor. Inside the castle, the atmosphere was feverish. Nearly every window that faced the lawn was crowded with anxious, curious students. Binoculars bobbed up and down. Those without pushed their faces to panes. I can see it! I can see it! There's fire! The flames are lighting everything up. The burning ring revealed the gargantuan outline of the serpent and the lone figure standing before it. Lucien Grafton. The name dropped like a stone and then exploded into conversation. Merlin's wand. How dare he face that monster alone? He's going to die. At the main entrance, Harry, Hermione, and Ron had just reached the heavy doors. They were locked tight. 2 suits of armor stood guard, weapons at the ready. The professors had sealed the exits. No student was to leave to face the basilisk. Upstairs, Hermione snapped, teeth set, and she darted toward the nearest staircase. At a window with a view, Cho stared into the steaming haze where the firewall blurred the scene. Her heart felt squeezed. Lucien, he... Her voice trembled. Marietta squeezed her hand and tried to comfort her. Look, the professors are rushing over, the deans too, and there are statues and suits of armor. Everything will be fine. Cho knew better. Lucien was clever and capable, but he was only 12. She had read about the basilisk. How could a boy, even a brilliant one, face that? By another window, Malfoy watched helplessly as Daphne grabbed his binoculars and leaned out, golden hair whipping in the wind and rain. "Hey, be careful," he hollered. If she fell, he'd have to catch her. Too many casualties already. "Draco, where's your broom?" Daphne chided. "Big sister," Malfoy said sourly. "Did you forget there's anti-flying magic around the castle?" "Oh, come on. If Lucien dares fight that monster, he must be confident. He's a Ravenclaw, not a Gryffindor." Malfoy peered at the distant light where Lucien stood. "You weren't here earlier. You didn't see that forest of lightning." Tsk, tsk. Lucien wasn't affected at all. "I suspect that lightning was summoned by him. If that was magic, it was over the top. Anyone else would have been killed. I wonder how many books he had to read to learn that trick." He trailed off, then muttered under his breath with a curl of his lip. "Such a shame I don't have a sister. Might have set them up to marry Lucien." Daphne didn't hear the aside. Crabbe and Goyle clumped up beside him, and Malfoy grabbed another pair of binoculars from Goyle. "Oh, it looks nearly finished now. It's smoking like it's been roasted." He adjusted the focus. "When did Lucien get a sword?" "It's shining." A chorus of gasps and whispers filled the castle. Above that clamor came a regular clicking sound. Harry lowered his binoculars to see Colin Creevey frantically pressing the shutter on a chunky, dark, short cannon of a camera, its lens trained on the distant lawn. "Colin, you're—" Colin's eyes were glued to the viewfinder. "My last camera broke, and Lucien lent me this one. The magical world is incredible. That giant snake is the one that attacked me last time." He babbled breathlessly, and then, shining with purpose, "This is sensational news. Lucien once told me I should be a reporter." The odd, excited behavior eased some of Harry's tension. He raised his binoculars again and fixed them on the ruined lawn. Rain, the ring of fire, steam, these were a hazy curtain separating the students from what happened there. And then everyone with binoculars saw what none of them would forget. Lucien rushed the basilisk. The long sword flashed through the rain as he brought it down on the monster's roaring head. Scorching, dazzling magical flames erupted along the slim silver blade. Within them, purple and blue arcs of electricity crackled and leapt. With an unflinching final stroke, he cleaved down. Boom! White lightning crashed from the sky. Golden flames shot up from the ground. The light was blinding, the roar monstrous. For an instant, everyone's vision blurred, and the only sensations were thunder, wind, rain, and the pounding of every heart. The dark, cold chamber of secrets, the basilisk's domain, whispered and gurgled far below. Elsewhere, in a cramped, dim room, Lockhart added the last ingredient to his boiling potion. "It's finally finished," he murmured. Tom had told him this potion's effects were brief. He'd had to brew it freshly. He peered into the black pipe, drawing deep, steady breaths. If he drank this, he'd arrive as a hero. He would perform dazzling magic, show unmatched courage, repel the basilisk, save the petrified students, protect Harry Potter, and secure his own fame. A first-class Order of Merlin could be within reach. He could already taste the glory. His smile lost its practiced polish and grew theatrical. He glanced down at the old diary on the table, ready to share his triumph with its worn pages, and saw a line appear in blood-red ink on the parchment. "No, you missed a few ingredients." Lockhart frowned. A prickling unease crawled over him. He pulled out his peacock quill, intending to write back. "I'm sure I put them all in." The paper trembled. Black smoke poured frantically from the surface of the page like poisonous snakes uncoiling from a nest. The smoke thickened and spiraled together, and in an instant solidified into a figure. A young man with black hair and black eyes, sharp, cold features, a faint mocking smile playing on his lips. His gaze was indifferent and lifeless as it looked down at Lockhart. "You," Lockhart breathed. He was terrified. This was no ordinary apparition. It was the kind of thing from the darkest stories he'd stolen. The handsome young man was more unnerving than the ugly creatures in those tales. "You don't recognize me already, friend?" the figure said. Lockhart swallowed and took a small step back, then forced a laugh and pretended to be at ease. "Oh, ha! Tom, this is the first time I've seen your true face. It's astonishing." He slid the peacock quill back into his pocket where his wand was kept. Tom, you said I missed an ingredient. What was it? 208, Tom's script. Tom, you said one ingredient was missing. What is it? Gilderoy Lockhart's question echoed slowly through the Chamber of Secrets. Tom Riddle only shook his head and answered coldly. Tom, I don't like that name. And stop fiddling with the wand in your pocket. Your magic is pathetic. Lockhart's smile froze. For a moment he seemed unsure how to respond, but Tom kept talking, stepping up to the cauldron and breathing in the medicinal steam. His body was so solid, so grotesquely complete, that he barely looked like a soul fragment. Gilderoy, this time has been rather enjoyable. I'm grateful you, a wealthy, fame-hungry fool, found the diary and had the means to buy restorative items for me. Dragon blood, for example. He swept his hand through the flames beneath the cauldron and made them flare. I'm grateful, too, that you're so incompetent, ambitious but talentless, desperate for fame that doesn't belong to you. That made you easy to manipulate. Hey, aren't you curious why you trusted a diary like that so completely? Why you followed my suggestions to target Harry Potter? Why you were the one to open the chamber? Tom's tone was casual, but each word landed like a hammer on Lockhart. The old man's breath hitched. The diary fell weakly from his hand. Tom materialized beside him in an instant and laid a cold, probing hand on his shoulder. Aren't you going to run? Lockhart panicked and bolted. As he fled, a memory charm shot from under his arm and hurtled toward Tom at incredible speed. Tom dissolved into a wisp of black smoke. The charm passed through him harmlessly. A cool, mocking voice floated back. Your memory charms are quite good, fast enough to rival a dueling master. You might be better off practicing other magic instead of so much theft and deception. Lockhart's wand clattered to the stone floor. He began to cough violently, clutching his chest. Tom reformed at his side and patted his back with the false affection of a friend, but his words were merciless. Didn't your own books say that dark objects demand a price? I had you gather life-giving ingredients, dragon blood, for example, so the cost of that diary is easy to figure out. You pay with your life. Lockhart's coughing subsided into stunned silence. He looked at his hand and saw deep, tree-bark wrinkles. Tom reached into Lockhart's pocket, took out the wand and a small vial, and returned to the cauldron. He spoke as if reciting a script. The world will remember you, Lockhart, opening the Chamber of Secrets, setting the basilisk loose, slaughtering students, sinking into sin. The boy who lived, Harry Potter, will die. Albus Dumbledore will resign under pressure and be imprisoned. Do you like the ending I wrote, my friend? Tears, murky and unexpected, fell from Lockhart's fading eyes onto his cracked hands. Tom unscrewed the vial and prepared to answer the question Lockhart had first asked. I'll tell you, the ingredient you missed was dragon blood. Once it's added, the potion used to stimulate magic will. Steady footsteps cut him off. Tom froze. A gentle, even voice finished his sentence for him. Become a potion that builds a physical body. It's best to add 16 milliliters of dragon blood. Too much or too little will change the result. Tom turned. A youth stood there, young-faced but composed. The once desolate chamber seemed to take breath at his arrival. Tom's eyes narrowed. The student's manner, like a tutor correcting a pupil, irritated him. Glasses perched on the youth's nose. Riddle's lips curled into a small smile. Harry Potter, finding this place so quickly is impressive. You truly are qualified to be my opponent. Silence fell, thick and awkward. Lucien, Lockhart croaked, struggling to lift his head to look at the boy. I was wrong. Hurry, tell the headmaster. Tom had been hiding in the diary and hadn't paid Lockhart much attention. He'd assumed the boy before him must be Harry. Lockhart's plea corrected him. The student Lockhart named was Lucien. Lucien didn't answer Lockhart. He only watched Tom with a steady, calm expression. Why aren't you finishing the potion? Lucien asked. He had seen this recipe before in Lockhart's office. A small change could transform the potion into something wholly different. Tom had learned a great deal from Slughorn about potions, but Lucien had discerned a key secret. One more ingredient, and the effect changed entirely. Tom's expression was smooth again, the earlier irritation gone. No hurry, Lucien. Meeting such an exceptional talent is a pleasant surprise. I'm curious how you found this place and evaded the basilisk. He reached out, searching for the connection to the basilisk, but found nothing. Tom's suspicions shifted. Perhaps the basilisk had moved too far, or the castle itself intervened. Then a heavy clack reverberated through the chamber, and an object rolled to Tom's feet. Scorched green scales, a bright yellow eye, feathers of a scarlet crest, the severed head of the basilisk. Lucien let the basilisk's head fall. Looking for this? Shock, fury, and a sliver of fear lit Tom's face. Lucien had killed the basilisk? A young wizard, younger than Lucien, had cut the beast down. The basilisk's petrifying gaze, its crushing strength, its venom, none of these should be easy to survive. Yet here lay its head, evidence of a swift, deadly victory. Tom's thoughts spun. Could Dumbledore still be at the school? Had he miscalculated? Black smoke wriggled through Tom's form as his mind roiled. Lucien took another step forward. Keep brewing. What, do you think I snuck into Lockhart's office as an animagus to tamper with anything? Is that what you suspect? Tom bristled. An animagus at Lucien's age seemed unlikely, then again, perhaps not impossible. He glanced at the vial of dragon blood and then at the cauldron. Humph, why try to trick me? These ingredients are fine, I can tell. Lucien nodded and advanced. Then continue. Tom's temper flared at the implication, but his impatience faded into calculation. Reforming a body was wildly unstable. He couldn't risk brewing and drinking the potion in front of Lucien. Better to eliminate the threat. He threaded magic through Lockhart's wand. The eye of peering magic centered on Tom, watching. Lucien sensed a magical anomaly in the soul fragment opposite him. He tightened his grip on his wand and produced an object in his left hand. A shout of pain, high and terrible, tore from Tom, though he didn't open his mouth. Dark smoke erupted in ragged waves from his form. Lucien stood beside the diary. In his left hand hung the sword of Gryffindor, its blade still beaded with basilisk venom. He let a few drops fall onto the diary. White vapors hissed up. The venom reacted to the Horcrux's surface, and Tom shrieked as if the venom burned him from the inside out. Your soul fragment can't touch the diary itself, can it? Lucien said, almost dispassionately. Tom staggered, clutching at a dim, pain-filled eye. Before he had a physical body, he could not lay his soul upon the diary, the Horcrux's physical anchor. Lucien pressed the advantage. He didn't want a pitched battle. Tom, having siphoned too much life force, was dangerous in a drawn-out fight. Quick and clean was best. With the diary weakened, any surviving Horcrux could be used as a reference later. If necessary, Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel could advise how to proceed. I have Slytherin's inheritance. I can share knowledge with you. Tom rasped, desperate to stall and tempt. Lucien's face flickered with temptation. Tom seized the moment to speak again, to weave words that might keep Lucien at bay. The scream cut him off. Tom collapsed halfway, black smoke billowing and thinning away as it fled him. You damned mudblood, he spat. In a swift, precise motion, Lucien dragged the sword of Gryffindor across the diary's cover. A streak of magical light seared across Tom's face, and then across the black smoke that hid his soul fragment, tearing at it. Lucien was not trying to destroy the Horcrux entirely, just to cripple Tom, to make him useless. If they needed to find Voldemort's other Horcruxes, leaving one intact might serve as a beacon. Whether he could follow the link between soul fragments was unclear, but Lucien could consult Dumbledore and Flamel on that later. Tom's soul reacted. With a howl, he burned through the life force he had hoarded, converting it into a last, frantic surge of magic. Reforming a body could wait. His immediate goal was eliminating Lucien. Magic flared around Lucien. Lightning like sigils shimmered, pressure filled the chamber, and the air snapped with the imminence of violence. The two forces braced, the next instant about to come. You have come, heir of Slytherin. A deep, ancient voice, as if it had traveled across time, echoed through the Chamber of Secrets. When that ancient voice echoed through the Chamber of Secrets, alarm bells went off in Lucien's mind. The heir of Slytherin, had Tom's magic triggered the old enchantments in the chamber? Some contingency left by Salazar to protect his heir? Lucien decided instantly. With his left hand, he drove the sword of Gryffindor into the diary. With his right, he sent a thunderbolt, crackling with purple-blue electricity at Tom. Plans couldn't keep up with change. He had to smash the hair of Slytherin first. The black smoke around Tom flared into eerie green flames. Just as the fire was about to strike Lucien, it smashed into the lightning bolt. Thunder and flame collided in a fierce explosion. Tom braced for the pain of his Horcrux being attacked, but the agony he expected didn't arrive. Worse, the power fighting the green fire suddenly ebbed. The light from the collision faded, and Lucien was gone. The sword of Gryffindor he had used to pierce the diary had vanished. Relief washed through Tom's soul form. A smile crept across his face. "Ancestor," he whispered, "you have sheltered your descendant and punished the mudblood who dared strike at your heir." He turned his attention to the statue carved into the chamber wall, Salazar Slytherin, tall, with a wrinkled monkey-like face and thin whiskers trailing along the floor. The founder who had hidden the chamber and the basilisk, waiting for his heir to appear. Tom had the gaunt blood. 50 years ago, he had found the chamber and claimed Slytherin's inheritance. In talent, blood, knowledge, and temperament, he considered himself the perfect heir. He stooped and picked up the vial of dragon's blood that had fallen, checking the remaining contents. There was still enough. He moved toward the cauldron, ready to finish the final step of his potion. The vial slipped from his hand. The bright red liquid trickled out. Tom watched his own translucent hand with disbelief. It was fading, disappearing at an alarming speed. "No," he began, but it was too late. His entire soul form thinned. A faint red glow rose from his chest and shot into the eye of the Slytherin statue like a crimson comet. Tom reached out, trying to clutch the last of his vitality, but he was too slow. His gaze locked on the statue in confusion, as his soul dissolved into a wisp of black mist that was sucked back into the diary. For a heartbeat more, a pale blue orb of light erupted from the forehead of Gilderoy Lockhart, long collapsed on the floor, and flew into the statue's eye as well. Light flashed before Lucien's vision, then brilliant white. He found himself standing in unfamiliar space, the whiteness surrounding him like a void. Instinctively, he raised layers of protective charms around himself. Shield charm, impedimenta, a warding of lightning-like armor. He was about to call Liu Guang and Apparat away when a slow, deliberate clap sounded from behind him. "Excellent reaction, good alertness," a faint voice applauded. Lucien's figure blurred. He apparated the instant the clapping began, reappearing a few paces away. Why hadn't Liu Guang responded? It hadn't answered his call at all. Lucien stared at the spot he'd left, trying to find whatever had spoken. The voice had been so close. He focused the eye of peering magic, his dark green irises dilating until they were pure black, straining to catch any trace of the speaker. "Interesting eyes, but not enough," the voice said calmly from behind. Lucien didn't hesitate. Dazzling lightning erupted from his wand tip and spread outward, centered on himself. In his perception, it struck nothing substantial, no feedback, no hit. The space felt uncanny, manifest illusions, perhaps ancient magic left by Salazar. An absurd thought crossed his mind, and he called the lightning back, letting it coil harmlessly around him. Then he spoke a single name. "Salazar Slytherin?" The name echoed endlessly in the white void. After a long breath, the ancient voice replied, and the figure of a man coalesced before him. Tall, middle-aged, silver hair, green eyes with vertical snake-like pupils, robed in an elaborate black garment. He regarded Lucien with curiosity. This did not look like the warped, monkey-faced statue. Perhaps this was Salazar, as he had once been. A soft sound in Lucien's mind made him frown. His wall of intellect had been shaken. The wall, an ancient protection Lucien had built from knowledge found in Nicholas's library and reinforced with branches and leaves from the homping willow, condensed his knowledge and magical strength into a barrier to protect his mind from memory-targeting spells like legilimency. The attack on it sharpened his vigilance. "What strange knowledge have you, wizard, been learning?" the silver-haired man asked. Then, oddly, the man began to speak of things that had nothing to do with magic at first. What is this about mass and energy not being two independent concepts, but different manifestations of the same entity, the mass-energy equation? Lucien's expression shifted. The wall's defensive power was enhanced by unfamiliar knowledge. The more foreign the information within it was to an intruder, the harder it was for that intruder to probe. Most wizards never studied Muggle sciences that made them susceptible to a shield built from such ideas. The man's gaze flicked to the Ravenclaw crest on Lucien's robes. Two orbs of light, one red and one blue, now floated in his hand. He rolled the blue orb thoughtfully between his fingers. "That Muggle knowledge, you are much like Rowena, Willing to learn anything for the sake of knowledge, the man observed. Rowena Ravenclaw. Lucien's chest tightened. The man knew the founders intimately. The familiarity in his voice, the comment about Rowena, all but confirmed his identity. A bigger question lodged in Lucien's mind. Why had Salazar not saved Tom Riddle? Why had he, instead, pulled Lucien into this space to speak of an heir? You've guessed it, the man said. I am Salazar Slytherin. As for what happened outside, don't worry. It's already taken care of. You are Lucien Grafton, a second-year Ravenclaw? Had Salazar's legitimacy pierced the wall? Lucien felt no breach, no feedback. Perhaps Salazar's mastery was simply too high, a legendary wizard's legitimacy unmatched by modern minds. Salazar smiled faintly as Lucien's expression flickered. Don't worry, I was not reading your memories but those of Gilderoy Lockhart, he said, weighing the blue orb in his palm. Lockhart's memories. Lucien followed the blue orb with his eyes and understood. Salazar hadn't invaded him, but had sifted through Lockhart's mind. Lucien cleared his throat. Dean Slytherin, if I may, there are things I must attend to. Could we wait until I finish them? Salazar waved a hand, dismissive. No need. This is a consciousness space. Time flows differently from the outside. Consciousness space. Lucien looked around with renewed curiosity. Everything felt real, and his magic was responsive, yet it was not the actual world. That explained why Lu Guang had not answered when he called. To test the rules, Lucien willed the sword of Gryffindor in his hand to vanish. It simply faded, not stored in a container, not transported, just gone by sheer will. Salazar nodded, pleased. Very astute, he said. Dean Slytherin, what a nostalgic title. His tone softened. How about this, Lucien? Will you accept my inheritance? A Ravenclaw like you must be thirsty for knowledge. Why refuse? Lucien had to be honest. He was tempted. Salazar was a legendary wizard. His inheritance and the knowledge left behind would be invaluable. Still, he had to ask the question burning at the back of his mind. What are your criteria for choosing an heir? He asked. Tom Riddle had opened the chamber 50 years ago. He controlled the basilisk and had raw talent, ambition, and the gaunt blood. On the surface, Tom seemed the natural choice. So, why choose Lucien? Talent, Salazar said simply, his emerald vertical pupils gleaming with something like pride. My inheritance is not for the mediocre. The answer fit the founder's arrogance, Salazar went on, softer now. Secondly, the purity and integrity of the soul. The soul is paramount. Lucien caught the key instantly. Perhaps 50 years ago, Tom might have met Salazar's standards before he had split his soul, but not now. Horcruxes had fragmented Tom's soul. A torn, repeated splintered soul could never be considered whole. What remained in the diary was only a fragment. It fundamentally could not satisfy Salazar's requirement. Young man, Salazar continued, your talent is greater. I awakened because the magical burst from both of you attracted me. Talent reveals itself not only through magical circuits, but through the signature in magical power. You will understand more once you accept my inheritance. He sighed. Horcruxes are ultimately a corrupt path. Salazar, a master of the dark arts, saw the diary for what it was. The act of splitting one's soul to anchor pieces elsewhere was abhorrent even to him. He lifted the faint red orb between his fingers and, with an almost casual motion, tossed it into his mouth and crushed it like a sweet. Lucien's brows rose. The red orb seemed to contain vitality itself. Catch! He flicked the pale blue orb toward Lucien. Inside are Gilderoy Lockhart's memories and his insights into the memory charm. That young man's work on memory charms is unusual. Lucien felt a flush of curiosity and gratitude. He had planned to study that very branch of magic from Lockhart himself. Salazar had saved him the trouble. With a snap of his fingers, the white space around them shifted. Before accepting my inheritance, take a test. Let me see what you're made of. 210. Enlightened Salazar. The room was decorated in an especially classical style. Salazar Slytherin glanced over Lucien's answer sheet. Runes. Ancient runes, if you prefer. You've mastered them well, he said. He had already tested Lucien in charms, transfiguration, herbology, and more, and was plainly satisfied. It's clear you've worked hard. You live up to your talent, especially in transfiguration. Has transfiguration developed to this extent in your time? Magical creature transfiguration? Lucien asked. Helga did research in that area back then, but I didn't see it in Lockhart's memories. Is this a new achievement that hasn't spread yet? Helga Hufflepuff, had worked on magical creature transfiguration? Salazar listened as Lucien explained, then his gaze shifted from the sheet to the boy's face. His green, vertical pupils moved from calm appraisal to something like disbelief. A sudden urge to probe the boy's memories with legitimacy flickered through him. 1 year to reach a new peak in transfiguration? Such rapid progress was almost unnatural. Could this be some ancient creature in human guise, a dangerous intruder in Hogwarts? The thought irritated him, and yet he dismissed it. He trusted the identification methods he and the other founders had left in the castle, and from Lockhart's memories, he knew the present headmaster was formidable, not incompetent. It must be natural talent. Besides, he scorned the idea of browbeating a promising junior. After a long silence, Salazar spoke slowly. You should be head of Slytherin someday. It suits you. Headmaster would suit you even better. Much easier to get things done. Lucien, suddenly burdened with that sort of responsibility, was stunned. How had the conversation moved from exams to appointments? Ancients, it seemed, thought in wide arcs. Salazar changed tack. When you were sorted, the hat, was it conflicted? Yes, Lucien answered. Salazar snapped his fingers, and the scene shifted to a workbench strewn with potion vials and alchemical apparatus. So in the end, you chose Ravenclaw yourself? As the one who had gifted the sorting hat with the ability to read a young wizard's traits, Salazar knew the sorting's purpose, to match a student's predominant quality with a house. Yes, I thought I could study in peace in Ravenclaw, Lucien said. Salazar nodded. The current atmosphere in Slytherin is not good. Lucien blinked. The founder of Slytherin had just admitted Slytherin's present state was poor. Before he could dwell on it, Salazar continued. All right, potions and alchemy next. He had not originally meant to test alchemy. Lockhart's memories showed alchemy was taught only in the upper years, but he had noticed Lucien had already designed and crafted many alchemical tools. Curiosity made him add it. As Lucien handled the materialized potion ingredients, he hesitated, then asked a question that had bothered him for a long time. Head of Slytherin, he began. When you chose your successor, you didn't seem to consider bloodline. Why? History recorded that Salazar Slytherin had broken with the other founders over admitting Muggle-born students, insisting on preserving pure wizarding blood. That ideology had defined Slytherin House for 1,000 years. Yet when Salazar had outlined his criteria for a successor, he had not mentioned pure blood lineage. Lucien found that omission striking. A complex expression crossed Salazar's ancient features. His voice was calm as he answered. Back then, emphasizing bloodline was necessary. In our time, Muggles feared and hated witches and wizards. Witch hunts were common. Many Muggle parents would not accept their children being wizards. They saw it as devilry. It would have been far too dangerous to let the Muggle world notice Hogwarts. So I insisted that Muggle-borns and half-bloods were unreliable. He spoke without shame. 10 centuries ago, the Muggle world's intolerance had been raw and violent. In that context, Salazar's conservatism had a grim logic. Lucien listened, unsettled. But as times change, Salazar added, the wall between wizards and Muggles cannot remain forever. The number of half-bloods and Muggle-borns will inevitably grow. That is irreversible. Thus, the insistence on blood purity was a temporary measure. Lucien felt a keen awkwardness. Salazar's view was far more enlightened than the rigid, villainous image the histories preserved. Had history misremembered him for 1,000 years? Encouraged, Lucien pressed on. Then your real purpose in leaving the Chamber of Secrets and the Basilisk wasn't to purge those you considered impure. Of course not, Salazar said. The Chamber and the Basilisk were an insurance policy I left for Hogwarts. If the school ever faced a dire crisis, my heir could use that power to preserve the school's spark. But Tom Riddle used the Basilisk to attack students, Lucien pointed out. Salazar nodded. I foresaw the risk of misuse. I placed a limitation on the Basilisk's eyes. Its gaze would not be an instant death curse for Hogwarts teachers and students. If the Basilisk truly intended to slaughter Hogwarts, a restriction I placed on its soul would activate and it would perish. So Tom's scheme to control the Basilisk and wreak havoc had been doomed from the start. Lucien felt a rush of embarrassment. He had killed the castle's 1,000-year guardian. Salazar seemed to read his thoughts and smiled with an even, detached patience. It matters little. The basilisk was only a tool. With your aptitude, when you are older, you will be able to leave Hogwarts with protections far greater than the basilisk ever offered. Now that the basilisk is dead, you can make use of its eyes. He pointed at Lucien. Your eyes are good, but there is room for improvement. 211. The lively Hagrid's cottage. Outside Hagrid's hut, the wind and rain battered on without let-up. Hagrid poked at the bonfire and muttered, "The thunder's been awful today. I've never heard it like this." Thump, thump, a knock sounded at the door. Hagrid stood up to open it and called, "Who is it?" "It's me, Hagrid." Recognizing Dumbledore's voice, Hagrid hurried to the door and pulled it open. "Oh, good evening, Professor Dumbledore. It's pouring. What are you?" He stopped. Beside Dumbledore stood someone else. Short and portly, in a suit with a bright red tie and purple-pointed leather boots, the man tipped a dark green top hat from his head, tucked it under his arm, and smoothed his slightly tousled gray hair. "Cornelius Fudge?" Hagrid blurted. Fudge had come in the worst of the weather and at the oddest hour. Hagrid's eyes dropped past the doorframe and landed on a line of aurors among the nearby houses. His face went pale. "Good evening, Hagrid." Instinctively, Hagrid stepped back and sank onto a stool with a loud creak. He looked from Dumbledore to Fudge, voice wobbling. "I didn't. Professor Dumbledore, you know." "Cornelius, I must reiterate, Hagrid did not open the Chamber of Secrets. I trust him completely." Dumbledore's tone was firmer than usual. Fudge spoke quickly, anxious not to linger. Hagrid understood what this was about, the Chamber of Secrets. 50 years earlier, the chamber had been opened and a student died. Hagrid had been accused, expelled, and his wand snapped. Now those old suspicions had resurfaced. "I'm sorry, Hagrid, but the Ministry must act. The recent attacks at Hogwarts have been serious." Dumbledore's face tightened. He was close to a breakthrough about the chamber. This crisis could be solved, and perhaps Hagrid's name could finally be cleared. He had never believed Hagrid capable of being the heir of Slytherin or of directing a monster to harm students. Fudge, on the other hand, looked flustered, dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. He had no wish to make an arrest at the headmaster's door, but pressure from certain pure-blood families had become unbearable. Fudge thought of the recent attacks, mostly Muggle-born victims, little noticed, but Blaise Zabini had been petrified, and he was pure-blood. The minister had been pummeled with indignant letters from influential parents despite Zabini's recovery. Their outrage did not abate. Those families gave substantial financial and political support to the ministry. If Fudge wanted to stay in office and eventually win a first-class Order of Merlin, he needed their backing. "Albus, you trust Hagrid, and I trust you, but not everyone shares that trust. We both understand our difficulties, but taking Hagrid away will solve nothing," Dumbledore said, anger flashing in his bright blue eyes. Take me away? Where are you taking me?" Hagrid's great frame trembled. "It'll be quick. You won't be long. It's just a precaution. When the culprit is found, you'll be released at once and will apologize." Fudge avoided Hagrid's gaze, looking guilty. Hagrid's voice shook. "It won't be Azkaban, will it?" Before Fudge could answer, there was another heavy knock. The door opened, and a tall, middle-aged man with platinum blonde hair swept in, a self-satisfied smile on his face. "Lucius Malfoy, what are you doing here? Get out of my house, leave!" Hagrid roared, anger replacing fear. Lucius covered his mouth with a gloved hand and sniffed disdainfully, his eyes sweeping the hut. "You call this a house? Entering it does me no pleasure." He turned, however, toward Dumbledore. "Ah, Headmaster Dumbledore. Fancy seeing you here." Dumbledore's displeasure deepened. He forced his voice steady. "Mr. Malfoy, what business have you with me?" Lucius chuckled softly and produced a rolled parchment from his robes. He unrolled it to reveal a temporary suspension order for Dumbledore, bearing the signatures of 12 governors. Dumbledore, a man of rules and procedure, was confronted with paperwork that struck at his position. Whoosh! A ball of crimson flame flared in the middle of the room, accompanied by a clear, almost childlike cry. The flames dissipated, and where they had been stood a handsome young man with dark green eyes. A small orange-red bird perched on his shoulder. He held up an old, worn diary in one hand. "Well, this is lively," he said. "Headmaster, I have something I'd like you to see." It was the heir of the Chamber of Secrets. A few minutes earlier, Lucien and the little Chelan had appeared on a patch of grass that the professors barely recognized, right beside the writhing body of the basilisk. The creature lay mauled, its throat cleanly sliced. Its head was already tucked into Lucien's pocket. A jagged opening gaped in its chest where its heart had been removed and likewise pocketed. The basilisk's eyes could be used to enhance Lucien's Eye of Peering spellcraft. The heart was intended to complete Norbert's dragon magical circuit. Lucien glanced at the circular barrier formed by the Chelan net fire. Time inside Salazar's inheritance space moved strangely compared to the outside world. The duel with Tom had ended quickly, and only a short while had passed since the basilisk had been slain. Lucien had been efficient. Li Guang, roll the shield back. The little Chelan obliged, its shape folding as the surrounding golden flames dwindled. As the fire died down, Lucien's figure solidified in view of the professors standing nearby. They also saw the basilisk's torn body, and their faces went white. The beast had already been killed by the time they arrived. A basilisk, an X-class magical creature, venomous, with deadly scales and lethal magical eyes. This one had lived for 1,000 years. Its danger could hardly be overstated. Yet it appeared to have been dealt with by a student, quickly and gruesomely. Its head was missing. "Lucien, are you injured? We should get you to the infirmary." Professor Flitwick, small and anxious, darted forward and circled Lucien to check for wounds. "Don't worry, Dean. I'm fine." Lucien lifted his arms and let Flitwick inspect him. Beyond dust on his robes, he was unharmed, hardly what one would expect of someone who had just fought twice in succession. McGonagall's expression was taut with conflict. As deputy headmistress, she had failed to sense the basilisk's presence in time. The crisis had been resolved by a student, and she felt ashamed. Lucien, sensing her discomfort, gave a small, conciliatory smile. "It was an accident. I got excited, caught up when I first saw a basilisk." It was true. The basilisk's appearance triggered the loan on the advanced elemental lightning rune, and with the need for its heart, Lucien had drawn his staff without hesitation. Snape, watching from the edge of the group, didn't rush to fuss over Lucien like the others. He kept a bottle of healing potion in his pocket and inspected the corpse closely. Basilisks couldn't breed naturally in their habitat. They had to be artificially cultivated, a difficult and rare process. In this region, they hadn't appeared in 400 or 500 years. From blood and scales to heart and venomous fangs, every part of a basilisk was valuable, especially its eyes. Snape walked the length of the carcass and noticed not only the missing head, but the empty cavity where the heart should have been. He remembered, in a flash, the silver longsword Lucien had shown when they first arrived, and turned his gaze back to the boy. Lucien knew what he had taken and had likely stowed the most precious parts away. As a potion master, Snape coveted those treasures and began calculating how he might trade for them. But this wasn't any ordinary student. Lucien had single-handedly killed a basilisk. That was a feat Snape had no reason to doubt, and it shifted his opinion of the boy's potential. His rate of growth was simply unreasonable. A small, orange-red bird alighted on Lucien's shoulder at that moment. "Cheap," it chirped, the young fox. Lucien gave the phoenix a nod, excused himself from the assembled professors, and with a courteous bow, he gathered the rest of the basilisk's corpse into his storage space. Scarlet flames wrapped him, and both boy and bird vanished. He reappeared inside Hagrid's hut. With Tom Riddle's diary now in his hand, Lucien scanned the room and found many familiar faces. "Headmaster, there's something you should see." His arrival cut across the conversation. When Lucius Malfoy glimpsed the diary, his triumphant smile froze. The parchment he'd been about to pull from his robes was thrust back into the folds of his robe. For a moment he thought announcing Dumbledore's temporary suspension at this instant, parchment signed by 12 governors, might be ill-advised. All eyes turned to Lucien. Lucius slid quietly toward the doorway, trying to look casual. "Ah, Lucien, good evening," Cornelius Fudge said, smiling in a way that was almost painfully ingratiating. He had met Lucien once before and had been impressed. Lucien returned the greeting and stepped forward, placing Tom's diary in Dumbledore's hands. Dumbledore, who had some instinctive unease about the book, felt cold, malevolent magic on it the instant he touched it. "Lord Voldemort, Tom Riddle." Dumbledore's grip tightened, thoughts flashed through his mind. The crisis in the Chamber of Secrets has been resolved. Lucien began, and he told what he could. Hagrid and Fudge sat stunned. Dumbledore felt increasingly concerned about the diary itself. Lucius, who had been shrinking near the doorway, paled further as Lucien continued. The basilisk is dead, and Gilderoy Lockhart didn't survive. When Lucien finished and announced Lockhart's death, Lucius allowed himself a tiny, almost inaudible sigh of relief. At least the trail hadn't led back to him. Then he caught a casual glance from Lucien that seemed to hold more meaning than the look itself, and his heartbeat sped again. He leaned against the doorframe and tried to read what the boy's expression implied. Fudge, who had grown progressively clammy as he listened, had reached for his handkerchief and paired the news with frantic wiping. The idea that Hogwarts harbored such a terrible danger was catastrophic for the Minister of Magic. If an appalling incident had occurred under the school's watch, Fudge's political career would be ruined, parents would rage, and fingers would point to the ministry as well as to the headmaster. He had had a lot of luck getting where he was. He needed stability and allies. And Lucien had just saved the students, safeguarded the future of the magical community, and resolved a crisis that reverberated across the world. Fudge's mind raced. This young man, barely into his teens, had effectively upheld the whole structure Fudge represented. Silence settled in Hagrid's hut for a long moment. Only the fireplace crackled. Fudge broke it first, his smile so ingratiating that Lucien felt slightly uncomfortable. A true young hero, Lucien. You've done us all an enormous service, slaying a basilisk, protecting the school and its students. He leaned forward eagerly. If you don't mind, could we see the basilisk's body? Not that I don't trust you, but public reassurance will demand evidence. I'm sure you understand. Lucien had no objection. If anything, this was a chance for proper recognition. He flicked his wand and the cramped hut expanded just enough. Then a heavy thud sounded as something was set on the floor. The basilisk's head was enormous and grotesque, its jaws parting to reveal rows of needle teeth. Its eyes had been removed. Dried blood stained the sockets. The empty gaze seemed, by some trick of the mind, to be pointing at Lucius, who started involuntarily. Fudge inhaled sharply. He had never seen anything like it. He stepped back, nearly tripping, and settled into a chair with the pallor of someone who'd just witnessed a bogey. The basilisk. This is the basilisk. He inched closer with a shaking voice, eyes wide. Dumbledore, pulled from his thoughts by the sight, fixed a thoughtful, searching look on Lucius standing by the door. Lucius had arrived prepared. Dumbledore had noticed the parchment earlier, and his presence here was suspicious. Lucius returned the look, but kept his face composed. "May I take a photograph? It'll help convince worried parents," Fudge said. Lucien nodded. An auror, summoned by Fudge, stepped in and slammed the door against Lucius' back by accident. "Sorry," they blurted. Lucius maintained his dignity and waved the mishap away. He wanted the matter over and to go home. The auror took several pictures of the basilisk's head as Fudge chatted to fill the room's silence. "What a night, Lucien. We must give you an award," Fudge said, as if offering the boy a personal favor. Dumbledore's expression shifted at that. The Wizengamot had earlier decided to award Lucien the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, for his innovations and contributions in transfiguration, making him the youngest recipient ever proposed. Some members had wanted to delay the honor, but his pioneering work had forced their hands, and Dumbledore's vote carried weight. But 2nd class had been the plan. 1st class was exceptional, reserved for those who had saved a great number of lives or resolved global-scale crises. Dumbledore's eyes lingered on Lucien. Hadn't the boy just done exactly that? Saved the school, averted a catastrophe that could have rippled through the magical world? "Cornelius," Dumbledore began, his voice thoughtful, "I think—" He didn't get to finish. A bright, unexpected voice cut through before he could continue. "I think we should nominate Lucien Grafton for the Order of Merlin. Order of Merlin, 1st class." Everyone turned. Lucius Malfoy had spoken, his gray eyes shining with a sudden, calculating intensity, as if he had just seized upon a neat political opportunity. The headmaster's office smelled of lemon and sugar. "Care for something sweet to calm your nerves? Tonight must have been a tumultuous one." Dumbledore smiled as he spoke to Lucien, waving a hand to conjure plates of candies and pastries. He plucked up a milk fudge and tossed it into his mouth. Lucien lifted his cup and sipped honey lemon water. Slaying a basilisk, confronting Tom Riddle, triggering the Slytherin inheritance, saving Rubeus Hagrid, it had been a night of extremes. He ought to take something sweet. Lucien passed by a plate of fudge flies and instead picked a creamy peppermint. The burst of sugar relaxed him. No wonder Dumbledore always kept candy on hand. A little sweetness after a long fight did wonders. "The Order of Merlin," Dumbledore said, setting down his teacup and smiling at Lucien. "I meant to surprise you with it, but circumstances have overtaken my plans." "Headmaster," Lucien said, "do you really think what Mr. Malfoy suggested is feasible?" When Lucius Malfoy had first proposed nominating him for the Order of Merlin, Lucien had been surprised that Lucius had offered it. On reflection, though, he recognized it as a display of goodwill. Whether or not Lucius knew the diary's true origin, he would use the opportunity to curry favor. Winning an Order of Merlin, first or second class, at Lucien's age would be sensational. The award's recognition stretched across the magical world, and the publicity would send sales of his inventions soaring, helpful for paying off the Emerald Tablet Fragment loan. Dumbledore, as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, explained the rules clearly. The second-class award was already in motion. It could have been presented before Christmas. If we reapply for first class, the ceremony may be postponed until next term. But with the groundwork laid, it will move faster, probably at the start of the next semester. "Good things are worth waiting for," Lucien said calmly. Dumbledore's pleased expression did not surprise him. Most people would have been visibly ecstatic. To be possibly the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin, and for the first class no less, was extraordinary. Lucien felt steadier than he had any right to be. He stared for a moment at the diary lying on the desk beside Dumbledore. "What about this diary?" he asked. Dumbledore's eyes flicked down to the faded, leather-bound book. A complex light shimmered behind his half-moon spectacles. "Tom," he began. "By the way, you mentioned the Slytherin inheritance," Lucien added. "Did Salazar's method deal with Tom afterwards?" Lucien had followed the instructions left in the Slytherin inheritance. After Salazar had passed it on, he had told Lucien to inform the current head of Hogwarts. Dumbledore sighed. It struck him as ironic. Slytherin's most brilliant student, ultimately abandoned by Slytherin himself. Dumbledore opened the diary. The yellowed pages inside seemed to stir. Words crawled into being, slow as if the book's life were barely clinging on. "Lucien, you won. I am willing to tell you all I know." The letters bled out slowly. Dumbledore paused, then produced a white quill between his fingers and began to write. "Long time no see, Tom. I never expected to see your younger self again." As the ink faded, a trace of Dumbledore's magic seeped into the diary. The tome's trapped soul suppressed its remaining flutters. After a few suspended minutes, it accepted the situation. The handwriting that appeared then, usually elegant, was now ragged and spidery. "Dumbledore," Dumbledore wrote again. "It is I. Hard to imagine you were only in your 6th year when you made this. You were once the most brilliant student Hogwarts ever had." Tom's reply was bitter. "Whether I am brilliant or not is not for you to judge." The diary grew silent. Dumbledore turned the Elder Wand in his hand and let a faint glow pass along its length, the light seeping toward the diary. Lucien watched, curious and cautious. "Headmaster," he said, "the head of Slytherin said that word, Horcrux. Is that what this diary is?" The instant he spoke, the magic Dumbledore was channeling hesitated. The portraits that had been murmuring around the office snapped awake, shocked into louder speech. "A Horcrux!" came a flurry of exclamations. "A Horcrux? A young wizard made a Horcrux while still a student?" Sharon, the former Ravenclaw headmistress, pushed her spectacles up and frowned with disbelief. She had studied countermeasures to the dark arts. She understood the evil of a Horcrux. Phineas, who wore a small mustache and always sounded bored, drifted in his portrait frame and sniffed. "A Horcrux? Something so important? Why are you all making a racket at this hour?" A larger, stern-faced portrait, Professor Morgan of Gryffindor, had had enough. He reached through his frame and clamped Phineas by the collar, silencing him in one efficient movement. "A Horcrux is a dark object," Sharon began, explaining to the others now fully roused. A wizard tears a portion of his soul through murder or other dark rites and hides that fragment inside an object. As long as the Horcrux remains, the wizard cannot truly die. Faces around the room changed as the meaning settled in. An outraged, almost horrified murmuring filled the air. That a student could stoop to such things was unthinkable. "My mistake," said a feeble voice. It was Armando Dippet, Dumbledore's predecessor and the headmaster who had known Tom Riddle as a pupil. He looked older than old, aged, pale, eyes clouded with regret. "I misjudged him. How could I have been so blind?" Armando had once admired Riddle. That admiration haunted him now. Dumbledore put a hand on his old colleague's shoulder. "All that is past, Armando. We have the Horcrux now. We can stop him from doing more harm." Armando shook his head. All those years ago, the Chamber of Secrets, Tom ended that crisis. But what if he engineered it? Was I wrong to suspect Rubeus Hagrid? Lucien thought of Hagrid, the big man who had carried the heavy burden of suspicion for decades. Dumbledore's look was reassuring. "I will see to Hagrid's name being cleared," he promised. "Right now, the Horcrux is the priority," Morgan said heavily. "We must find a way to destroy it. Sharon, can it be destroyed?" Sharon pinched her temple and considered. "Horcruxes are defended by powerful dark enchantments. Ordinary means won't suffice. The destructive force must be overwhelming, so great that the Horcrux cannot repair itself by dark magic. The essence is the soul fragment. For anything that targets a soul, the most effective things we know are the killing curse, Avada Kedavra, or an extraordinary destructive charm, Fiendfire, for instance." Lucien spoke up then. "During the fight, basilisk venom got onto the diary. I didn't realize what it would do at first, but Tom's soul inside the diary screamed with pain. It was badly destabilized." He produced a small vial from his pocket. A few drops of bubbling, greenish venom glimmered inside. On the table beside it lay the Sword of Gryffindor and the Sorting Hat. "The Sword of Gryffindor?" Morgan's portrait lit up. He could scarcely contain himself. The goblin-made blade, the legendary prize of the founding house, lay dazzlingly real on Dumbledore's desk. Only those who embodied the qualities of Gryffindor could pull it out in times of need, the stories said. "Should have put him in Gryffindor, child," Morgan sniffed, and then another voice cut in with mockery. Phineas, newly composed after his earlier choking. "Now is not the time to argue house placements, Morgan." Even as the portraits bickered, Dumbledore did not pick up the venom. He lifted the sword. "Lucien, did this blade come into contact with basilisk venom when you struck?" Lucien nodded. Dumbledore's expression sharpened. With one slow motion, he drew the sword across the diary's cover. A flash of white fire flared along the blade. The leather parting, a neat cut formed, and a thin black smoke seeped from the wound. Beneath it came faint, terrible wails. "The Sword of Gryffindor absorbs substances that strengthen it," Morgan cried. "Forged by goblins, goblin-made swords bind with what makes them stronger. Quick, use the sword to slice the soul inside. Finish it," urged others in the portraits. A chorus of calls filled the office. Destroy the Horcrux, kill the piece of soul now and be done with it. But Dumbledore held the sword where it was, and his eyes were not on the bleeding diary so much as on the thin, struggling thread of life within. "If we destroy this Horcrux intact," he said quietly, "we lose a chance to follow the connection back to the Maker. A fragment of a soul must still be linked somehow to its original body. With this Horcrux, we may be able to trace Lord Voldemort's main body." The room fell into a different kind of silence. Searching for Voldemort, finding where the rest of him hid, was the key. The world was large. Tracking a vanished, disembodied mind without a clue would be like finding a needle in a field of needles. The Horcrux was a map, however twisted and stained. Dumbledore's thought that the diary could point the way to Voldemort was, in some ways, the evening's most valuable discovery. Lucien watched Dumbledore's face. He felt the weight of what had been done that night. It had been his sword blow and the venom that had crippled the diary's hold. Perhaps he had brought the first real hope of ever catching Voldemort. "Headmaster," Lucien asked, lowering his voice, "can a wizard make only one Horcrux?" Dumbledore's expression changed. The brief elation at being given a trail to follow drained away, replaced by a hard, thoughtful gravity. The other portraits, who had lingering excitement about the capture, quieted at once. That a person might willingly tear his soul in more than one place was a nightmare worth considering. Sharon's face tightened. Creating a Horcrux rend the soul. It is excruciating and changes you. Anyone who could do that once might do it again if they sought immortality. The more fragments you hide, the less whole you become. Your humanity erodes. Dippet's hand trembled where it lay in his lap. If he has more than one, then destroying one will not end him. Lucien felt the urgency of his own suggestion settle in. He had meant, by bringing the diary here intact, to make Dumbledore see the possibility of multiple Horcruxes early. The faster they grasped that, the sooner they could begin a systematic hunt. The fewer people who suffered because of one man's hunger for life, the better. He did not wish to study in a world rent by that kind of darkness. A hush spread. Dumbledore looked at the diary, at the thin cut in its cover, at the sword lying across the desk, still warm from the strike. For now, the piece of soul inside was weakened, not destroyed. It would buy them time and a direction. Lucien thought, briefly, of the Order of Merlin. He had been so close to being surprised with an honor. But other things mattered more now. Clearing Hagrid's name, preventing further deaths, finding a way to unravel the dark puzzle that was Voldemort. If destroying this Horcrux too quickly would cost them the chance to find the rest of him, then patience and cunning would be required. Dumbledore sheathed the sword and set the diary gently back on the desk. The portraits watched him, waiting for his next command. "We will not be reckless," he said at last. "The diary will remain in secure custody. We will study it, ask it questions while it endures, and we will prepare for what may come. If there are other Horcruxes, we will find them. And if there is a way to spare innocents, Hagrid among them, we will do it." Lucien nodded. His hands were steady. The night had been long, the work far from over, but at least there was a plan now, and allies who would face what came. The sweetness in his mouth from the peppermint lingered like a small, private blessing. The great hall, early that morning, was laid out with a lavish breakfast, but most of the knives and forks remained untouched. Almost every student's eyes, whether deliberately or not, kept drifting back to a particular spot at the Ravenclaw table. Lucien sat there as usual, quiet, collected, but the image of him last night, sword in hand, slaying the basilisk amid rain, fire, and thunder, had been burned into everyone's memory. When Dumbledore rose to speak, the murmurs died away. Though the students had seen the basilisk's death the night before, the full story was still unclear. "As you all know, something unusual occurred outside the castle last night," Dumbledore said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I must explain. The Chamber of Secrets and the basilisk within were indeed left by Salazar Slytherin." A ripple ran through the hall. The idea that one of the school's founders had left behind such a monster revived the old fears, yet Dumbledore continued gravely. But their original purpose was not to purge those deemed unworthy of the school. Slytherin left them as a safeguard for Hogwarts. He let that settle, then went on. "Unfortunately, that power has been twisted. Someone brought a dangerous dark artifact into Hogwarts. Their mind and body were bewitched and controlled by it, and this person carried out a series of attacks this term." Voices rose around the hall, angry and relieved all at once. Even if he was bewitched, his intentions were monstrous. Lock him in Azkaban. Let the Dementors teach him a lesson. The terror of the last weeks, the corridors avoided, the dread of being chosen by a hidden monster, spilled into the room. A few students glanced toward the staff table and noticed an empty seat where Professor Lockhart usually sat, all bright colors and extravagant smile. A few murmurs hinted at the curse that seemed to afflict the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, and Dumbledore did not leave the mystery to fester. "I am sorry to tell you that the person who was bewitched into controlling the basilisk was Gilderoy Lockhart. He has already paid the price with his life." Gasps and low sobs echoed through the hall. Dumbledore swept his eyes across the students. "I must remind you, if you ever encounter powerful magical objects that can communicate or respond to requests, report them to your professor or your parents immediately. Do not explore them alone. They can hide unpredictable dangers." At Lucien's table, his roommate Terry leaned over and hissed into his ear, the sound just for the two of them. "Merlin's socks. At least Quirrell managed a year. Lockhart didn't even make a semester." Lucien, who'd been present at both retirement scenes, only nodded. Terry grumbled on, "The defense against the dark arts job is cursed, isn't it? 2 professors gone in a row." Dumbledore smiled now, and the hall went quiet again. "The crisis has been lifted. You need no longer fear. And in this crisis, a student displayed unparalleled courage and strength. He made an indelible contribution to protecting our school. Let us thank Mr. Lucien Grafton." The applause that followed was thunderous, almost lifting the great hall's ceiling. Students from every house cheered. The Gryffindors went so far as to blow whistles. It was applause for a hero and the sound of relief after weeks of fear. When it subsided, Dumbledore announced, "To commend Mr. Grafton's contribution, Hogwarts awards him the Special Contribution Award. Ravenclaw will receive 200 points." "Yeah!" Ravenclaw erupted. 200 points was enormous, more than half a year's house scoring for many houses, and it put Ravenclaw in an unassailable position for the House Cup, at least for now. Other houses reacted in various ways. Hufflepuff shrugged its easy acceptance. Some Gryffindors and Slytherins tried quick mental arithmetic and wondered if Quidditch and Christmas bonuses might close the gap, then remembered the holidays were almost here and lost interest. Although the Basilisk episode had bought the students a few days to recover, there was still a week before the Christmas holidays, and lessons resumed. In defense against the dark arts, Severus Snape stood as usual at the front of the room, his voice low and controlled. The banishing charm operates by emitting a concentrated burst of magical force that propels the target away. It is the precise opposite of the summoning charm. It's useful for pushing away thrown objects or temporarily repelling close-range attackers. He flicked his wand and dismissed a training dummy lunging from the corner. It smashed into the canvas-padded wall. The students listened closely. After Lockhart's flashy performances and Quirrell's strange tenure, Snape's clear explanations, precise demonstrations, and focus on practical application had restored the class's dignity. His expertise made teaching look effortless, and Lucien noticed a different energy in him. Perhaps the post fit Snape better than anyone had expected, despite whatever curse hung over the position. As Snape turned to write on the blackboard, Ron nudged Harry and whispered, "Doesn't he sound different? Less, well, venomous than in potions?" Harry was about to reply when a cold voice cut through. "Weasley." Snape didn't look back. "Talking in class, distracting others. 5 points from Gryffindor." Ron fell silent, cheeks reddening. When the bell rang, Snape packed away his materials and fixed his gaze on the students filing out. "Lucien, come to my office." Lucien knew the score. 9 times out of 10, Snape wanted something to do with the basilisk's corpse. A basilisk was a treasure trove for potioneers and researchers. Eyes, heart, venom, scales, organs, all valuable but delicate. Walk into Snape's dim, herb-scented office, lined with jars and specimens, and the question was inevitable. "Do you know how to process a basilisk corpse?" Snape asked. "Yes, Professor," Lucien answered. Salazar Slytherin had taught Lucien dissection methods and breeding techniques as casually as if he were describing butchering chickens, and Lucien had learned that basilisk bodies required special tools and care because their skin and scales had strong magical resistance. Snape blinked at the crisp reply. He had prepared to guide and perhaps share the materials if Lucien needed help. Instead, Lucien added, "The process is troublesome. The skin's magic resists ordinary knives. You need particular cuts and tools." "Do you want to trade for some basilisk materials?" Snape asked. "What would you like in exchange?" Snape inquired. "Finished potions, ingredients, recipes, books?" Lucien didn't hesitate. "Recipes and books, Professor." Snape expected no other answer. He knew Lucien's appetite for knowledge. "I need a basilisk eye. Just one." The eye, full of concentrated magic and linked to deathly properties, would be invaluable as a catalyst. Lucien shook his head. "I need both eyes myself. Could we look at other parts?" Under Slytherin instruction, Lucien had been steered toward enhancing his Eye of Peering magic and had plans that required the eyes. He had also picked up that not all of Salazar's research stayed in the castle. The founder had traveled and left pieces of his work scattered. Over the winter break, Lucien planned to take Norbert to several Norwegian Ridgeback gatherings to test and perhaps find more remnants of Salazar's legacy. Snape frowned but didn't press. "Then part of the heart?" Lucien declined that too. The heart was the basilisk's vitality center. He needed it for a magic weaving technique, an essential component for optimizing Norbert's magical circuit. I have other uses for the heart, but there may be leftovers. We can discuss it later. Snape watched Lucien for a moment, then said slowly, "You intend to use the eyes and heart in alchemical applications?" He had seen Lucien produce odd alchemical devices before. If anyone was going to use such materials wisely, it would be him. Lucien answered vaguely, "Magic experiments, magical engineering." After some bargaining, Snape agreed to reserve several things: basilisk gallbladders, brains, and substantial quantities of venom, scales, flesh, and bone. He waved his wand, and a set of scrolls and a few thick books floated down from his shelves onto the desk. Lucien scanned them quickly and paused over one with a worn cover and faded ink. Advanced potion making. He drew it out and flipped through. Almost every page margin was filled with terse, dense annotations. On the back cover, in small, neat handwriting, a single line read, "This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince." Lucien read the tiny inscription on the back cover of Advanced Potion Making aloud, voice low. "This book belongs to the Half-Blood Prince. Prince? Prince? Prince?" At the sound of Lucien's soft murmur, Snape's hand, hidden in the sleeve, trembled. He suddenly regretted taking the book out. Who would have thought Lucien would pick it up first and have the sharp eye to spot the small print? Worse, why did he immediately latch on to the pun in prince? Snape reminded himself that Ravenclaws answered riddles for their common room entrance. Their minds were keen, and Lucien was one of the sharpest. Lucien glanced up and met Snape's gaze. The professor looked composed, almost bored. A mischievous thought lit the boy's face. "Even at a glance, you can see extraordinary, unconventional insights into potion making," Lucien mused. "This is a 6th-year textbook, so the original owner, the Half-Blood Prince, must have been a prodigy, already full of useful notes. Half-Blood Prince, he must have been proud of his family name. Prince, by mother or father's side, I wonder? Professor, you must remember him well, being the potions master and all." Snape's temple throbbed as Lucien's deductions kept coming. If the boy continued, the truth would slip out. Snape turned his head away and cleared his throat. "Just a student from many years ago. I've long forgotten. I have potions to brew. You should go back." Lucien tamped down a smile and with practiced politeness put the book back among his things. Just as he reached the door, Snape's low voice stopped him. "That book contains some minor charms. Do not use some of them lightly on others." "Understood. Thank you for the warning." Back in his trunk space, Lucien began to study advanced potion making properly. Harry had found this book in his 6th year. Snape must have put it where Harry would discover it. With the Half-Blood Prince's annotations, Harry had made enormous strides in potions, partly because the potions master had changed and Harry's resistance eased, and partly because the notes themselves were brilliant. Even written as the thoughts of a student, they showed the mind of a future master. Lucien enjoyed the potions tips, but his attention kept drifting to the charms scrawled in the margins. Sectum Sempra, Levicorpus, and practical, non-combat tricks like Muffliato, which filled nearby ears with harmless noises to keep conversations private. He couldn't resist trying a few in the training room. He waved his wand at a bionic practice puppet. Sectum Sempra. The puppet was flung backward as if struck by an invisible blade. Lucien summoned it over and examined the wound. Though he had restrained the curse, the slash nearly split the puppet at the waist. The synthetic flesh around the cut had been torn, and blood oozed slowly. The charm's invisibility and speed made it hard to dodge, brutally effective. "Vulnera Senentor," he murmured, tracing the counter-curse. The puppet's blood rewound into its wound as if time itself retraced the injury, the cut sealed. Ordinary healing charms could not undo Sectum Sempra, but this counter-curse could. Satisfied, Lucien tried a few other spells and logged their effects: speed, invisibility, consequences. He left the training room with a small, pleased smile. At the dragon's enclosure, a massive magic circle thrummed low. At its center, Norbert slept. Sleeker and more elongated than a typical Norwegian ridgeback, his black scales shone like polished metal, and golden patterns pulsed with each breath. Floating before Lucien was the most crucial reagent, a basilisk heart, still faintly beating. Nearby lay phoenix tail feathers tempered with dragon blood, Mithril solution, stable energy crystal gems, rare and common components arranged meticulously. Lucien raised his wand. Azure flame licked from its tip. He fed more than half of the basilisk heart into the fire. It melted into a dark green energy stream. He blended the mithril solution, phoenix feathers, and crystal powder in exact proportions. The mixture spun into innumerable delicate meridian threads that shimmered like liquid light. In his mind, he replayed the circuit model he had designed. The threads flew toward Norbert and threaded into his magical circuitry. As the final filament merged with Norbert's scales, the dragon erupted in dazzling golden light. The dark green energy from the basilisk heart surged and wrapped Norbert like a cocoon. Golden filigree glimmered through the shell. It wasn't a transformation, only an optimization of the dragon's circuit. The dragon's innate power made the procedure demanding. Materials had to be precise. According to the system's rules, Lucien had to keep the optimization within species limits. He could not make Norbert so different that the magic weaving technique's annual loan would not consider the result a Norwegian ridgeback. The repayment terms required cultivating the king of the breed, not inventing a new species. Lucien read from the manual he'd swapped for with Snape and tweaked his process. Time passed. He had read more than half the book by the time the cocoon burst. Roar! Norbert's cry cracked the air. The dark green shell split, and golden and crimson flames shot upward. A shock of magical fluctuation blew Lucien's robes around him. When the flames died away, Norbert stood revealed. The changes were subtle. The golden patterns on his scales had coalesced into more intricate bas-relief designs when dormant. "Papa, you didn't lie to me. It really didn't hurt," Norbert rumbled, flicking his tongue as if to lick Lucien's untidy hair. Dragons don't do cute well when they're grown. Their voices are loud and their manners blunt. Norbert, however, had been raised by Lucien and had learned to switch to a less infantile vocabulary compared to his hatchling days of only calling Mama. Lucien examined the effects. Norbert's breath had shifted from orange-red fire to a dark golden flame, intensely hot, adhesive, and difficult to extinguish. Once ignited, it burned continuously until the target was incinerated, reminding Lucien of Liu Guang's net fire. The sustained burning property matched that technique. In addition, Norbert could now cloak his entire body in flame, boosting defense and close-quarters offense. Strictly speaking, the optimization had expanded Norbert's existing flame magic rather than inventing something wholly new. The egg's inheritance of Qilin Netfire made such a development plausible. He raked his fingers through Norbert's cheek scales until the dragon purred. After a while, he told Norbert to rest. As the dragon lifted off and disappeared on soft wings, Lucien produced 2 enormous eyeballs from his kit. The globes were bright yellow with vertical pupils that seemed to stare into oblivion. He exhaled gently. "It's my turn." 2:16. New abilities of the Eye of the Demon. Hagrid's hut was cozy and warm, the fire keeping the wind and snow at bay. The air smelled of rock cakes and strong black tea. Hagrid wiped at the corner of his eye, his voice thick with gratitude. "I really have to thank you, Lucien. If it weren't for you, I'd probably be headed to Azkaban." He shivered at the thought. "That place isn't fit for people. Those Dementors, they're terrifying." "Dementors?" Ron, sitting beside him, asked curiously. Hermione took up the explanation at once. "They're the guards of Azkaban, dark magical creatures. They drain a person's happy memories until all that's left are the worst ones. They can even give you a Dementor's kiss, take your soul out of your body." Harry and Ron went pale and hunched their shoulders. "Don't worry," Hagrid said quickly, forcing a lighter tone. "As long as you behave and don't do anything that would get you sent to Azkaban, you won't see them." Lucien lifted his teacup and sipped in silence, thinking that whether they went to Azkaban or not, they'd be seeing Dementors at Hogwarts next year. Hagrid's mood brightened, his face flushed with excitement. The truth from 50 years ago finally came out, and the Ministry officially cleared me. I've been told I can go to Ollivander's and buy a new wand. I can use magic openly now. Ron blinked like he'd suddenly remembered something and turned to Harry. "Hey, Hagrid, Harry told me that when you went to the Dursleys to pick him up, you somehow made his cousin's ear sprout a pig's tail?" Hagrid's big, hairy face went pale, and he flailed his hands. "Shh! That was an accident. You mustn't tell anyone. Just pretend it never happened, all right?" Everyone promised. Harry and the others looked a little baffled, while Lucian's eyes fell on the conspicuous pink umbrella by Hagrid's bed. Although Hagrid's wand had been broken by the Ministry 50 years ago, Dumbledore had secretly repaired it with the Elder Wand and hidden it inside the umbrella for him to use. During the conversation, Hermione glanced at Lucien and felt something odd. His dark green eyes seemed deeper than before. When their eyes met, she felt a sudden sting in her own eyes, shut them reflexively, and softly hissed. Noticing this, Lucien asked, "Are you all right?" Hermione rubbed her eyes and shook her head. "I'm fine. It just felt strange looking into your eyes." Harry nodded. "Me too. I didn't feel like I could look directly at you." Ron, who didn't believe in such things, leaned in and stared, then quickly turned away after less than 2 seconds. Hagrid grumbled, "I didn't feel anything. You all look the same to me." Lucien thought for a moment, took a pair of silver-rimmed glasses from his pocket, and put them on. "How's that?" "Much better," Hermione said. Lucien understood then. He'd just modified the Eye of Peering magic using basilisk eyes, and the enchantment hadn't been fully stabilized. Some of the magic was leaking. Its original powers had been enhanced in various ways, catching magical flow, dynamic vision, microscopic zoom, but it had also gained a new effect. When he made eye contact with a living creature, the target sank into varying degrees of paralysis. It was reminiscent of a basilisk's death gaze, but far weaker. He'd only used basilisk eyes as material to modify a wizarding artifact. A wizard's magical circuitry differed fundamentally from a basilisk's, so the original power couldn't be perfectly replicated. Lucien had run experiments with a big rooster borrowed from Hagrid. If he held eye contact long enough, the paralysis would deepen and could become lethal, but the process was painfully slow. To almost kill a single chicken, he had to stare for several seconds. Afterwards, he pampered the rooster with a hot, spiced bath as compensation. Through other tests, he found that even brief eye contact caused paralysis, but the effect depended on the target's magical strength. The stronger the opponent, the weaker the paralysis. He hadn't tried to use it to kill a human, but he reasoned that to get an instantly lethal result on anyone he stared at would take much greater magic on his part, maybe too much, or he'd suffer from dry eyes from staring too long. As it stood, the ability seemed of limited use against true powerhouses like Dumbledore. Lucien suspected the effect also depended on the gap between his own magical power and the opponent's. When his magic grew, the paralysis and lethality would presumably improve. For now, it was mainly a weapon against weaker foes. A glance could be deadly to someone far below his level, and against equals, it could be used to create an opening. He glanced at Hagrid and reminded himself that Hagrid had felt nothing partly because Lucien hadn't fully activated the eye, only residual leakage had reached them, and partly because Hagrid, as a half-giant, had extremely high magical resistance. Lucien had the impression that Hagrid, even without a wand, could shrug off a great deal of magical interference. Conversation moved on to plans for the winter break. Lucien said he didn't plan to stay at school. The world outside demanded his attention. Ron announced happily, "I'm going home. George and Fred saved up to buy me a new wand." They saved for a whole month. Even though they tease me all the time, they really are like older brothers when it matters. Harry listened with clear envy. He had always wanted the warmth and noise of the Weasley household. Lucien, though, looked a little puzzled. The twins had only saved for a month to buy Ron a wand. A single wand cost 7 galleons. Was the pay he'd been giving them really so small? He smiled faintly to himself. Ah, Ron, such a kid. Crimson flames burned and embers scattered as Lucien and Dumbledore rematerialized in the headmaster's office. Fawkes, who had brought them back, fluttered his wings and settled into his nest, already dozing. "Well," Dumbledore said, settling into the roomy headmaster's chair. He conjured a pot of tea and a plate of pastries with a small flick of his wrist. "You saw the core of Hogwarts' magic. What do you think?" Lucien sat opposite him and thought for a moment before producing a small, colorful crystal ball from his pocket. The emotional energy inside had already reached the container's limit. Some time before the basilisk incident, Dumbledore had promised him he could observe Hogwarts' core. Only now, with the castle's affairs mostly settled and the headmaster exhausted from dealing with the fallout, Dumbledore had the time to fulfill that promise. "It's profound," Lucien said. "The magic corps has kept this ancient castle running for 1,000 years. The founder's methods are remarkable." He turned the crystal ball in his palm, then hesitated. "But I felt that a lot of the emotional energy and magic accumulated in the corps is redundant." Dumbledore sipped his sweet black tea and smiled without any of the theatricality he sometimes adopted as headmaster. "You mean it seems wasted, sitting there unused, when it could be put to better use?" Lucien scratched his cheek, embarrassed that Dumbledore had read the thought so easily. For refining a philosopher's stone, the purest material would be the soul energy released at death, but in this era, such an opportunity was rare. Nicholas Flamel's alternative, collecting and purifying people's emotions, was difficult and painstaking, but viable. The treasure trove hidden in Hogwarts was tempting. "Ahem, headmaster, I thought so. But the school's been here 1,000 years. Someone must have considered this before. The fact that the energy's still there suggests limits or complications." Dumbledore nodded, put down his teacup, and explained gently. "First, emotions. There aren't many ways to use that particular material effectively. Flamel's methods of collecting and purifying emotions are complex. It's not something easily improvised. Second, the magic. That isn't magic tied to a single person. It's a mass of spells and power dissipated by generations of students, gathered and preserved by the corps' properties. It's extremely mixed." Lucien's doubts fell into place. The purer the material, the better the results. The corps' stores were a muddle of countless sources, so its practical efficiency must be low. It's only really suitable for running the castle, moving staircases, lighting rooms, basic functions? Roughly, Dumbledore agreed, popping a chocolate frog into his mouth. And to tap it requires the headmaster's authority. If you want to try being headmaster someday, give it a go, eh? Lucien flushed inwardly. Headmaster felt very far off. They traded a few more casual remarks, and then Dumbledore looked at him with a new expression. "By the way, Lucien, would you be interested in doing an exchange at another school for a while?" "An exchange?" Lucien blinked. "Hogwarts runs exchanges?" Dumbledore explained. "A few days ago, Headmistress Olympe Maxime of Beauxbatons wrote asking if Hogwarts and Durmstrang would collaborate on a 3-school competition, partly an exchange, partly a warm-up for a larger event." Lucien's mind immediately leapt to the Triwizard Tournament and the Goblet of Fire. The invitation felt like another ripple from the butterfly effect of his recent changes. "Will it be at Beauxbatons? What events are planned?" "At Beauxbatons, yes, beautiful grounds," Dumbledore said. He hesitated, then smiled and said the single word, alchemy. Lucien's interest sharpened. Beauxbatons alchemy program, supported by Flamel, was reputedly the best. An alchemy-focused contest on their home ground would be significant, though as an exchange, perhaps the stakes would be limited. Seeing Lucien's expression, Dumbledore added, "I was thinking of sending you." Lucien barely concealed his surprise. "Headmaster, why me?" Dumbledore spread his hands as if the answer were obvious. "You've produced more alchemy pieces this semester than most students manage in a lifetime, and you showed an interest. It would be rather poetic to have Nicholas Flamel's student represent Hogwarts and win an alchemy contest at Beauxbatons." Lucien stared. Dumbledore's sober tone made the idea sound almost like a little design of his. After a moment, he said, "If I go, what's in it for me?" "Don't worry," Dumbledore said. "If you participate, I'll fill another emotional crystal ball for you. If you win, I'll fill 3. Lucien's eyes lit up. A few more crystal balls would let him refine additional philosopher's stones. The single stone Flamel had given him was inconvenient. He'd had to disassemble and reassemble it repeatedly. He hesitated, then bargained. "If I win, could you fill 5? Dumbledore blinked at the haggling, then laughed. "Very well, 5 it is." Dumbledore estimated the exchange would take place next semester. They talked a little longer about arrangements, and then Lucien took his leave. Once Lucien had gone, Dumbledore drew out a drawer and produced the old diary, scorched by basilisk venom and nicked by the sword of Gryffindor. He took up the gnarled elder wand and let a barely visible filament of magic probe the Horcrux's surface. Time slipped by. He lowered the wand, removed his half-moon spectacles, and massaged his temples. Tom Riddle had refused any attempt at communication and had sealed the core of the Horcrux, slowing Dumbledore's progress. It was a Horcrux, a domain of the dark arts. Though Dumbledore himself had talent in those fields, he hadn't pursued the study to its darkest heights since that tragic year. He found himself considering who in the world had sufficient mastery of the dark arts to advise him, his thoughts drifting toward Nurmengard. Christmas came, and with it, time in the Ministry of Magic. "Mr. Fudge, I thought this would be handled by the Auror office. I didn't expect you to attend personally." Lucien walked through the ministry's halls beside the Minister for Magic. Fudge chuckled. "Those alchemy items concern Auror's safety. I naturally want to keep a close eye on them. Lucien, it's astonishing you can produce such high-quality pieces at your age, genuinely ingenious." "You flatter me," Lucien replied. "It's fortunate the magical world has such a responsible minister." They were speaking about the ministry potentially buying Lucien's defensive alchemy items. The ministry's usual collaborators would not be replaced overnight, but Fudge wanted to build a closer relationship with the young inventor. For Lucien, the patronage was welcome. Besides wealthy pureblood families, the largest market for defensive alchemy was the Aurors, whose work carried much greater risk. An additional layer of protection for them was always valuable. As they laughed their way toward the main hall, a pair of jewel-encrusted spectacles fixed a sharp, assessing gaze on them. Rita Skeeter had not expected to recognize Lucien in person so soon. The photos from the basilisk incident had circulated fast. On a stormy night, lightning flashing and golden fire everywhere, a young man bearing a long sword had struck at the basilisk. The image was striking and had made its way into many papers. Spotting Lucien beside Fudge left Rita certain she'd found a story. She smoothed her elaborately piled blonde curls, clicked her high heels, and approached. Lucien, who had already noticed her watching, beat her to the introduction. "Rita Skeeter? May I help you?" Rita's professional smile froze for a beat at being named, then returned with practiced cheer. "Hey, I didn't expect you to know me, Mr. Grafton. What an honor. I'm a reporter for the Daily Prophet. May I have a word?" Lucien didn't answer immediately. Rita, accustomed to famous interviewees behaving in all sorts of unpredictable ways, stood patiently. If she failed to secure an on-the-record interview now, she'd simply transform into a beetle and slip into Hogwarts to catch the real story later. After all, school would be breaking for the holidays soon. It wouldn't be hard to get what she wanted if she persisted. 218. Rita's interview regarding Rita Skeeter. The strongest impression Lucien had was that she understood the essence of journalism. Her reports always grabbed attention, catered to what readers wanted to see, and did not let the truth get in the way. If he agreed to an interview, there was no telling how he'd be portrayed. Still, Rita was an animagus. She could turn into a beetle and slip into places others could not, which gave her access to countless exclusives. She hadn't registered with the Ministry of Magic, though, and an unregistered animagus caught by the authorities would be vacationing in Azkaban. That kept her cautious. As long as she didn't invent things, she was a superb promoter. A flattering article could make him more famous, sell more of his alchemy tools and potions, raise revenue, and help him pay off the debt on the incomplete Emerald Tablet. Promoting his products had its advantages. With that in mind, Lucien offered a polite smile. "Madam, shall we find somewhere quiet to talk?" They moved to a private sitting room, quiet and elegant. Rita sat upright on the sofa, eyes flicking around the room while she dug into her crocodile skin handbag and produced a dazzling green, slender quill and a sheet of parchment. "Is this your doing, Mr. Grafton, finding such a convenient place for an interview?" "It just happens to belong to my family," Lucien said casually. The casualness of that remark made the quill Rita had been about to tuck into her mouth hesitate. She hadn't intended to appear as if she were flaunting wealth. Pressing the tip of the quill between her lips to steady it, she set it upright on the parchment. "Then I'm in your debt today. One moment, let me, Rita Skeeter, reporter for the Daily Prophet." As soon as she said her name, the green quill slipped from under her control and began to write on its own in a flamboyant hand. The beautiful Rita Skeeter, with her untamed quill, exposes many false reputations. Lucien watched the extravagant script unfurl. It was a quick quotes quill, notorious for turning mundane interview answers into sensationalized nonsense. Noticing his gaze, Rita snatched the parchment away, crumpled it, and shoved it back into her bag. Slaying a basilisk is truly a rare feat, she said, deliberately changing the subject. But I heard you're only a second-year student at Hogwarts, Mr. Grafton? Lucien nodded. The quill, meanwhile, had already begun to rewrite his words on the paper. Lucien Grafton is not only astonishingly talented, but handsomely charming. Every gesture reveals a composure and charm far beyond his years. No wonder endless whispers of admiration echo through Hogwarts. Lucien pointed at the quill with a faint smile. That quill's output is a touch exaggerated. Rita pulled the parchment closer, feigning indifference. Don't give it a thought. Lucien shook his head slightly, amused. The information capture array at its base focuses on auditory and emotional runes, designed to glean tone and feeling and embellish them automatically. His precise explanation of the quill's mechanism made Rita's heart race, but she managed to straighten her glasses and keep her composure. Speaking of which, Grafton, you recently published 2 transfiguration papers that caused quite a stir among scholars. I hear you're confident in alchemy as well. The quill's just for shorthand, she added, as if that excused its antics. When Rita's tone remained unrepentant, Lucien continued, unruffled. Actually, on transfiguration, I've had some new thoughts about animagi. Rita's quill darted across the parchment, sensing a big headline, another discovery by Lucien. For instance, identifying an animagus while they are in animal form, he said, emphasizing the word. If an animagus is unregistered with the ministry and someone reports them, they could be sent to Azkaban, Dementors, and all that. Rita's hand froze. The quill stopped mid-scratch. She listened as Lucien went on about privacy and the idea that no one liked to be spied on by a seemingly ordinary animal who was actually a wizard. Relief flooded her when Lucien admitted the research was still incomplete. He wasn't hinting at a scandal, just talking about his work. However, Lucien said, I did develop an unexpected spell that can identify an animagus in human form. It should help the ministry find illegal animagi. Miss Skeeter, would you like to see it? He withdrew his wand. The simple action triggered a wave of panic in Rita. For a moment, she forgot the rule that students were not supposed to perform magic outside school. She was a beetle animagus, exposed, illegal. Lucien's next sentence made the situation worse. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm a student, he added with a mild chuckle. I can't cast spells willy-nilly outside of school. Those words barely registered before he continued, casual and direct. I've used this spell at the ministry. Miss Skeeter, your animal form is rather interesting. A beetle, is it? A beetle. The single word struck Rita like a blade. Her gem-encrusted glasses slid down her nose as sweat slicked her forehead. If Lucien had merely suggested she was an animagus, she might have dismissed it as a bluff. But naming her exact animal form revealed a dangerous awareness. Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears. The panic at the thought of Azkaban and Dementors made her vision swim. She could feel faintness coming on. Lucien's next, softer remark was an anchor. I hope for a truthful and fair report. Is that feasible? Rita forced herself to push her glasses up, flustered but concealing the terror. Understood. Understood. The green quill scurried across the parchment, laboring to cross out its previous embellishments. When the interview finally ended, Lucien stretched and produced a letter from his pocket. The envelope bore a crest, black, green, and silver, with a sinuous serpent, and a ribbon with the Latin motto, Purest ever shall conquer. It was an invitation from the House of Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy had asked Lucien to come to Malfoy Manor for a meeting before the holidays. Though polite on the surface, the wording had urgency beneath it, likely about Tom Riddle's diary. Lucien suspected Lucius was anxious that the diary had been the source of the Chamber of Secrets incident. The crisis had been resolved, but if it ever emerged that the diary had come from Lucius, the Malfoy family would face a storm of public outrage and political consequences. They had arranged to visit Malfoy Manor that afternoon after handling some ministry business, and Lucien hadn't expected to run into Rita. Fortunately, the interview hadn't delayed him. Malfoy Manor rose from the Wiltshire countryside, ostentatiously luxurious, white marble catching the sunlight. Dobby the house elf met him at the door and led him along immaculate gardens to the drawing room. Lucius Malfoy stood by the fire, his platinum hair flawless, a snake-headed cane in hand. "Grafton, welcome," he said, with a practiced smile. "It's a pleasure you could come." "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Malfoy." They exchanged the usual pleasantries, weather, ministry gossip, yet Lucius's occasional tapping of his cane betrayed his unease. Conversation drifted to Hogwarts. "Your conduct at school has been impressive," Lucius said over a cup of tea. "But how did such a dark arts object get into the school?" From his own inquiries and from Draco's accounts, Lucius knew Lucien had been involved in the basilisk incident and had some connection to the diary, perhaps learning about its origins from Lockhart. Lucien, however, suspected that Lucius did not know exactly what the diary truly was. Voldemort would not have entrusted such a secret as a Horcrux to someone like Lucius, or at least not explained it. To Lucius, the diary was likely just a valuable dark artifact that could be used against Dumbledore, something to stir trouble. If Lucius had known it couldn't be destroyed, he would never have tried to send it into Hogwarts. Destroying it would have been a betrayal of Voldemort. For Lucius, the diary had been a weapon to embarrass Dumbledore and assert pureblood influence, but he had not anticipated disaster. "Lockhart's dead," Lucien said casually, "so tracing the diary back is difficult." Lucius relaxed a fraction. Some questions needed no fuller answer. "Dobby," he called. Dobby apparated at Lucius's side, hands overflowing with a stack of books. Lucius smiled at Lucien. "Draco tells me you love to read. Have a look at these." Lucien did not immediately take them. Lucius watched him, then surprised him with another question. "Grafton, what do you think of house elves?" Taken aback by the sudden topic, Lucien answered honestly. "They're excellent at household work, skilled in domestic magic, and naturally loyal to their masters." The word loyal seemed to pull at something in Lucius. He glanced at Dobby, who kept its head bowed. Lucius chuckled and corrected him. "Loyalty to a family, not merely a person. The heirs of the family automatically become the elves' masters." "I intend to transfer Dobby to you," Lucius said. "What do you think?" Lucien blinked. "Transfer? House elves are normally passed down through generations of wizarding families or owned by ancient houses," Lucius explained with a faint lift of the chin. "But what matters is the master-servant contract between the family and the elf. If the elf hasn't been set free, that contract can be maintained and the elf stays bound. We have a method that allows an elf to be transferred to another master while preserving the contract, but the elf will only serve you. Your descendants will not inherit the enslavement contract." This was new information to Lucien. He understood then why Lucius had been furious when Dobby was freed in that other incident. It wasn't merely losing an elf, but the loss of a valuable, binding contract. Lucius added, as if boasting an old family secret, "The method of transfer is a Malfoy family art." Lucien's thoughts flicked to practicalities. Having a house elf to manage his trunk world, helping care for magical creatures and maintaining his equipment, would be convenient. Lucius would have no trouble finding a replacement elf if needed. What he offered was more about influence and favor than charity. In turn, Lucius probably saw Dobby's recent disobedience as a liability and was seizing the chance to shift responsibility. If Dobby knew anything about the diary's origins, it made sense for Lucius to move the elf out of immediate reach. Lucien looked at Dobby, whose large, moist eyes peeked up at him before it dropped its head again. The offer was generous in its way, and the politics behind it were plain. Lucien gave a measured reply, keeping his thoughts carefully guarded. 219. Conversation in Nurmengard. Nurmengard's towers were wrapped in a biting wind. Snow clung to the mountains beyond the only narrow window of the top-floor cell, whose door stood ajar as though waiting for a visitor. Dumbledore pushed it open. The prisoner faced the window. When Grindelwald turned, his gaunt figure was robed in familiar gray. His voice, rough with disuse, greeted Dumbledore. "The frequency of your visits over the last 12 years is flattering. I need your help with something, Gellert," Dumbledore said. A smirk tugged at Grindelwald's lips. "So you only remember this place when you need something?" The cold wind was the only other sound. After a long pause, Grindelwald broke the silence. "Ask, then. I'm curious, what could trouble Albus Dumbledore now?" He moved to the simple wooden table, pulled out a chair, and sat. Unused parchment lay in a neat stack. Dumbledore sat opposite him, produced an object from his robes, and pushed it across the table. Grindelwald's heterochromatic eyes caught the glint and focused on the old black diary. He brushed a slender finger over its worn cover. "Horcrux," he said, more a confirmation than a question. Dumbledore nodded. Grindelwald's expression grew serious. Even among dark arts practitioners, Horcruxes were the most profane of taboos. Few truly understood them, and fewer still would attempt to make one. Grindelwald had once briefly considered such measures for absolute security, but he had rejected the idea. To him, splitting the soul was an unacceptable deformation of humanity and reason. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "Is it his, Tom Marvolo Riddle's, Horcrux?" Dumbledore affirmed it. Grindelwald's eyes narrowed and returned to the diary. He spoke slowly, low and even. "He has gone too far down the dark arts, Albus, farther than I supposed." Grindelwald treated the dark arts as a tool, powerful, sometimes necessary, but not the whole of magic. He tempered them with other disciplines to avoid their corrupting influence. That restraint, he reasoned, made him comparatively normal. Voldemort, by contrast, had surrendered entirely to the dark arts. His talent, combined with reckless practice, had made him uniquely dangerous. Dumbledore sighed. Tom's obsession with immortality warped everything. For him, creating Horcruxes wasn't merely ambition or cruelty. It was the pursuit of endless life itself, even if it required repeatedly tearing his soul apart to make these things. Grindelwald caught the implication quickly. So he made more than this one. Dumbledore's look confirmed Grindelwald's deduction. If there were only one Horcrux, Dumbledore's talents might yet find and destroy it. But the worry in Dumbledore's face betrayed the deeper fear. He began to outline his suspicions. After Lucien's reminder, Dumbledore believed it was very likely that Voldemort had created multiple Horcruxes. The massive discontinuity in Voldemort's personality between his youth and later life, rationality yielding to frenzy, paranoia, and cruelty, could not be explained by power alone. "Splitting the soul, perhaps many times," Dumbledore said quietly. "Only that can explain the monster he became, but we can't even tell how many there are, much less find them. Fortunately, we have a complete sample now," Dumbledore continued, "and perhaps it will point the way. We owe much to that child, Lucien." Mention of Lucien shifted the conversation to the recent events at Hogwarts. When Dumbledore described the basilisk, Grindelwald's gaze flickered as if to an unpleasant memory. Years ago, he had experimented with breeding similar creatures to strengthen his persuasive methods. Before the eggs could hatch, though, a certain curly-haired boy who wandered with a suitcase and had an excessive passion for magical creatures had discovered them. In the ensuing chaos, the eggs were broken. "If you're looking for Horcruxes," Grindelwald said, tapping the diary lightly, "you're planning to use the connection between soul fragments. This diary is an excellent starting point." "Yes," Dumbledore agreed. "It's a complete Horcrux." And he paused, his blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles narrowed. "This Horcrux is unusual. It bewitched others, could communicate like a living person, stored Tom's student memories, and even tried to reshape a body. Perhaps the soul fragment in it was a larger portion." Dumbledore had grown fearful. There was already a fully formed Voldemort gathering strength somewhere. If another, younger form could be resurrected, if a Horcrux could attempt to remake a physical body, then the world would face disaster. The diary's behavior suggested it was special among Voldemort's creations, perhaps one of his earliest. Grindelwald considered the possibility at length. This was likely made during his student days, perhaps his first Horcrux. The prerequisite is murder to split the soul. "Perhaps he was clumsy the first time," Grindelwald went on. "Even a cruel youth is still a youth. He might have split off too large a fragment, one that retained many memories and could, given opportunity, shape a body." Dumbledore nodded. "Very possible. But however large that fragment is, the Horcrux's inner core has sealed itself. Outside of direct destruction, I can't penetrate it. Gellert, I haven't touched a wand in decades, and I haven't cast a proper spell in even longer," Grindelwald interrupted. "In my state, it would be difficult to help you research Horcruxes." He looked at Dumbledore with a half-smile, as if gauging his old friend's reaction, whether Dumbledore would risk reopening old wounds in the wizarding world for this new peril. Dumbledore met his gaze calmly, then reached into his robes and pulled out a wand. When Grindelwald saw it, his expression froze. 15 inches, knotted, elder wood, thestral tail hair at its core, the Elder Wand. For a moment, Grindelwald's features shifted between longing and caution. He raised a hand and touched the wand, but it seemed to resist him. He chuckled softly and pushed it back toward Dumbledore. "Have you forgotten what this wand is? Give me any other wand. This one only follows the victor." The Elder Wand, one of the Deathly Hallows, answered only to power and conquest. After Dumbledore had defeated Grindelwald all those years ago, the wand recognized Dumbledore as master. Instead of insisting on the Elder Wand, Dumbledore produced a plain wand and handed it to Grindelwald. Grindelwald propped his head on one hand and asked lightly, "Al, are you testing me, seeing if I still hunger for ambition? Do you really trust me not to act, or is this something else?" Dumbledore put the Elder Wand away, without answering. Grindelwald, undisguisedly pleased by Dumbledore's refusal to place the greatest weapon in his hands, examined the diary with the simple wand. "I have always believed that love is the greatest magic in the world," Dumbledore said, quiet as a remark over tea. To Grindelwald, those words were heavy. Love had been what stopped him. Dumbledore had used it once, and it ensnared the most dangerous wizard in the world. Nurmengard's walls could not hold Grindelwald, nor could the outer wards and aurors. Only Dumbledore had been able to halt him. Both men knew that if Grindelwald left this prison, the wizarding world would panic, and Dumbledore would be forced to stop him. Grindelwald muttered to himself as he studied the Horcrux. Cunning old man. While Grindelwald examined the diary, Dumbledore thought ahead. To find and destroy every Horcrux, they must trace Voldemort's life. His family, the Gaunts, the times and places that shaped him after Hogwarts. It was a monumental undertaking, but necessary. Voldemort's mastery of dark arts alone was dangerous enough. With multiple Horcruxes, it would be impossible to defeat him without locating them first. Dumbledore planned to inform Severus Snape, who had worked undercover for Voldemort and was trusted by him, hoping Snape knew things no one else did. Grindelwald's voice interrupted Dumbledore's thoughts. "That student from your school, Lucien, resolved the crisis again. What was the name of the child prophesied to be the savior?" Harry Potter," Dumbledore answered instinctively, and then froze. He had intended to take Harry under his wing, to teach him courage and responsibility. How to proceed now, with all this to do, worried him. Grindelwald's lips curved. "The diviner who made that prophecy teaches divination at your school. Has she ever prophesied about Lucien?" Dumbledore adjusted his spectacles. Sybil Trelawney, whose prophecies had seemed fanciful for years, had indeed made one true prediction, the intertwined fates of the Savior and Voldemort. It named when and where Voldemort's opponent would be born and decreed that the two could not both live. Dumbledore believed Lucien, by his deeds so far, would leave a mark on the history of magic. But he could not make sense of the result Grindelwald had divined about Lucien previously. "Hogwarts offers divination in the 3rd year," Dumbledore mused quietly. "Lucien may come into contact with it then." He was curious whether someone like Lucien, so anomalous, could be shaped by divination education. Grindelwald returned the diary and the simple wand to Dumbledore, closing his eyes for a moment as if tired. "This one study won't yield everything," he said. The implication was clear. Dumbledore would have to make more visits. 220. Norwegian Spinosaurus, Norway, the sparsely populated northern mountains. 3 wizards wrapped in thick wool cloaks trudged through the accumulated snow, picking their way along a hollow between ridges. "Dawn, can't we transfer departments? The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures is killing me," one complained. "Exactly. The 3 of us are on dragon's duty. Those beasts are too dangerous. One slip and you're crippled, or worse, collecting a pension," the other added. Dawn, their lead, listened for a moment before offering the only consolation he had. "Head office said they'd give us subsidies." That was like pouring salt on the wound. The 2 immediately complained louder. "Subsidies? We bloody well deserve those. It's almost Christmas. What sane muggle would come up here? And we still have to patrol the biggest Norwegian ridgeback habitat, obliviating any muggles who see a dragon. The weather's atrocious. Wind and snow so thick we can't ride brooms. We have to walk." Dawn sighed, trying to placate them. "Roar!" A titanic dragon roar rolled down the mountainside, carrying a faint scent of dragon might. The wind and snow stilled for a heartbeat as the sound echoed off the cliffs. Dawn's face tightened. That was the roar of a Norwegian ridgeback. Dragons are among the magical creatures most likely to be noticed by muggles. They're huge, they fly, and they sometimes pass near human settlements. Some muggles also like to push themselves into wild places, increasing the chances of discovery. Another problem was right now, roar! An even harsher, more oppressive roar answered, shaking loose a few flakes of ice. "Those things are fighting again. Don't they ever rest?" one of the men muttered. Dragon fights were common, volatile tempers, battles that obliterated mountaintops and burned forests. Such displays made discovery by muggles almost inevitable, which made these patrols thankless work. Among dragons, Norwegian ridgebacks were notorious, aggressive and quarrelsome to the point of killing their own kind. All right, let's hurry and set up a perimeter." The others grumbled but followed. They quickened their pace as the roars got closer. They could see bursts of dark gold flames stabbing into the sky. "Whoa, why is the dragonfire dark gold? Is that a mutation?" Not unexpected. Could be a mutation, or some hybrid, something with unusual magic. They reached a concave valley and saw two huge black shapes tearing across the wind, spitting fire at one another. Snow along their path melted instantly. Earth and rock disintegrated where the flames licked. The larger of the two lunged, confident in close combat. Just as they were about to clash, one of the dragons erupted in dark gold flame, wrapping itself in a burning shroud. "It looks like a mutated species." "I've never seen that before," one whispered. "Forget the fight for now. Scan the surroundings. Check mountaintops and other entrances for any muggles who might have wandered in." Dawn produced a small enchanted monocle, slipped it on, and swept the snow-scoured ridgelines. His gaze caught a lone figure standing on a distant peak. Unsure if it was a wizard or a muggle, he tweaked the monocle with a flick of magic and zoomed in. He saw hair the color of dark gold whipping in the wind, and just as he leaned to make out the face, the figure turned. Dawn met a pair of deep, ink-green eyes. For a second, a cold like the mountain itself seemed to clamp around his bones. His limbs went numb as if the wind had frozen his skin and soul. The figure vanished. Then, silently, someone spoke a single word of memory magic. "Obliviate." "Like clockwork," Lucien said, shaking his head as he looked down at the three wizards standing frozen on the slope. He had done this before. Whenever he brought Norbert to test contested Norwegian ridgeback gathering grounds, he ran into patrols, wizards who monitored the dragons and kept muggles away. He could have set up wards and barriers, but the area was too vast and the dragons too mobile. Efforts like that created more trouble than they were worth. Instead, Lucien preferred a simpler approach. Find a good vantage point, observe, and if necessary, clean up after a stumble. He stepped off the peak and, with the practiced motion of a skilled legilimens and enchanter, cast the memory charm. From the tip of his wand, a dozen pale blue hands, an effect of the charm's light, reached toward the three men and touched their temples. Lockhart's enhanced version of the Obliviate had its merits. More precise erasure, smoother transitions, and the ability to weave small, plausible insertions into the target's memories so the charm didn't leave glaring gaps. Lucien had read Lockhart's notes and refined the technique further, deleting traces of his own presence, pruning their recent impressions, and inserting a tidy outcome for the dragon fight that left the wizards believing the invader had been driven off. He altered the memory of the fight so that Norbert's performance would seem unimpressive. The crowd leader supposedly routed him. Norbert fled in panic, and the valley returned to normal. It made their confusion cohesive, plausible, and harmless. Too many added memories, or anything that clashed with someone's personality, invited unpredictable fallout. Lucien avoided that. When the pale hands dissipated, he conjured a small, enchanted suitcase and slid the three men inside, a pocket of portable, secure space. He would drop them off in a safe, populated area once the work was done. Back in the hollow, the real outcome of the battle was clear. Norbert, his scales roiling with dark gold flames, had forced one of the local ridgebacks to back down. The opponent had attempted to engage with normal dragon breath, but that breath was consumed by the dark gold fire. Norbert's new flame burned hotter and clung more tenaciously, It ate through ordinary dragons' attacks and stuck to their hides. Norbert's body had been reinforced by potions and secret techniques, but he was still young. Where he lagged in raw muscle and combat experience, the newly developed magical circuit ability to surround himself in dragonfire made him a terrifying close combat opponent. The enemy hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. With a final roar, Norbert pinned the opposing leader. The other Ridgeback whimpered, subdued. Lucien apparated beside them. Norbert bounded across the snow, then rubbed his warm head against Lucien's outstretched hand. Lucien checked him over. No injuries, then turned his attention to the defeated female Ridgeback. He produced potions and poultices and forced some of the concoctions into her jaws. If he hadn't been able to speak to magical creatures, and if Norbert hadn't been standing there calming the dragon, the wounded creature might have thought he was trying to poison it. The female Ridgeback's breathing slowed, lucidity returned to her eyes. She snarled softly through her recovery. "Little girl, you won. My territory and my mate are yours." Norbert sniffed and replied bluntly, "No need. I only wanted to fight." A brief, human-like sympathy flickered in the female's gaze. "Are you ill?" Dark gold flames licked Norbert's flanks again. Lucien smiled and cut off the exchange. He climbed onto Norbert's broad back, wrapped in charms against wind and snow, and they rose into the clouds. Lucien had a plan. He had borrowed the magic weaving technique, annual loan, over the winter, and to repay it, he needed Norbert to become the dominant Ridgeback in the region. Dragon succession was merciless but straightforward. Fight until the other submits. In species as aggressive as Norwegian Ridgebacks, leadership passed to the victor in bloody contests. Because they were so belligerent, their numbers were sparse, and they clustered in northern ranges. Norbert didn't have to beat every individual, only the leaders of gathering spots of a certain size. Lucien estimated he could complete the process before Christmas and spend the holiday properly with his aunt. He landed Norbert a safe distance from the main gathering. Then, Lucien opened the enchanted container and released the 3 wizards, who blinked as if waking from a daze. He deposited them where they wouldn't stumble back into dragon territory before closing the box. Suitcase world. Lucien stepped into the layered pocket dimension accompanied by a house elf, Dobby. Lucien had shown Dobby once how to tend mooncalves, how to feed them, nurse them, and collect their materials. He asked casually, "Did you remember that? Need another demonstration?" Dobby shook his head so hard his ears flapped. I remembered, boss. No need for more trouble." Dobby had taken to calling Lucien boss. When Lucius had suggested transferring Dobby's service to him, Lucien had thought about it and accepted. As Lucien gathered more magical creatures, having a house elf to help with care was exceedingly convenient. Besides, Lucien suspected that, even if he had refused, Lucius would have disposed of Dobby as a traitor. Dobby's story was complicated. Lucien wondered how the elf had managed to act against his master's will, while the master-servant contract should have bound him absolutely. Dobby had always seen his old master's deeds as wrong, and he'd been clever enough to work within loopholes, steering, obstructing, but never openly breaking the contract in a way that could be punished. House elf servitude is ingrained. Most are content to serve without complaint. An elf that yearns for wages and freedom is almost unheard of. When Lucien took Dobby, he gave him a real choice. He told Dobby about Kubi, Nicholas's house elf, and how Nicholas had freed Kubi's parents. Freedom sounded great, but life outside servitude could be harsh. Dobby remembered how difficult it had been for free elves to find work in the original story, and how Dumbledore had eventually offered Dobby paid employment at Hogwarts with holidays and wages. Lucien used that example. He could employ Dobby himself, offering wages, holidays, and fair treatment. No binding contract, just a stable job and the freedom to accept or refuse. Dobby hesitated, then accepted. Lucien didn't want to play the tyrant. He preferred to give choice, because giving someone the power to choose is the truest kind of freedom.